The morning sun cast long shadows across the frozen Texas landscape as Liam Hayes saddled his horse Storm. The 10-year-old Appaloosa nickered softly, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. Another day of mending fences on the Red Pine Ranch that stretched before them, a routine that had remained unchanged for the past decade. At 46, Liam's face was weathered by sun and sorrow, deep lines etched around eyes that had seen too much. His strong hands, now calloused from ranch work, moved with practiced efficiency as he tightened the saddle cinch. These same hands had once performed delicate surgeries on the smallest of patients, saved countless lives. That was before the fire, before he lost everything that mattered. "Easy, boy," he murmured, as Storm shifted beneath his touch. The horse had become his most constant companion, perhaps the only living being Liam allowed close these days. The ranch hands respected Liam's skills, but knew to keep their distance. They called him the quiet one behind his back, shared theories about his past over whiskey at Miller's Tavern in town. None came close to the truth. None knew that Liam Hayes was once Liam Hayes, renowned pediatric specialist at Chicago's Children's Protection Center, a man who had testified against some of the city's most powerful families in child abuse cases. A man who came home one night to find his house engulfed in flames, his wife Jennifer, and 5-year-old son Michael trapped inside. The authorities called it an electrical fire. Liam knew better. The timing was too convenient, coming just days after his testimony had sent the son of a prominent Chicago family to prison. But without proof, all he had was his grief and guilt. He had fought for justice for other children while failing to protect his own. Swinging into the saddle, Liam clicked his tongue and guided Storm toward the creek boundary of the property. The forecast called for a winter storm later that afternoon, and he needed to check the fence line where Miller's Creek tended to flood. The morning air bit at his exposed skin, but Liam barely noticed the cold. Physical discomfort was almost welcome these days, a distraction from memories that never faded. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon as Liam rode along the creek bank. The water rushed faster than usual, swollen from upstream snowmelt. He dismounted to check a section of fence that had been damaged in the last storm, tethering the storm to a nearby tree. The wind picked up, carrying the promise of snow. That's when he heard it. At first, Liam thought it was just the wind or the rushing water, but then it came again. A sound so faint it was barely there. A whimper. A cry. Something was caught in the branches overhanging the creek about 30 yards downstream. A burlap sack, half submerged in the frigid water, snagged on a fallen tree branch. Liam's heart began to pound. In his years at the ranch, he'd seen all manner of things washed downstream. Trash, animal carcasses, once even a stolen safe that had been dumped after a robbery in the next county. But this sack moved in a way that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The creek was running high and fast, the water temperature barely above freezing. Liam hesitated only a moment before wading in, cursing, as the icy water soaked through his jeans. The current pushed against his legs with surprising force, nearly toppling him twice before he reached the sack. Up close, his worst fears were confirmed. The burlap moved slightly, and when he touched it, he felt something solid inside. Something alive. With trembling fingers, Liam worked at the rough rope that sealed the top of the sack. The knot was tight, clearly tied by someone who meant business. When he finally pulled the opening wide, his breath caught in his throat. A baby girl lay inside, no more than 8 months old, with wispy blonde hair matted to her head. Her skin was a terrifying shade of blue-gray, her lips nearly purple from cold. For a terrible moment, Liam thought he was too late. Then her tiny chest rose slightly, and her eyelids fluttered. Blue eyes, startlingly bright against her pallid skin, looked up at him. Her lips moved, forming a sound barely louder than a whisper. "Ma, Ma." Something inside Liam shattered at that moment, a wall he'd built around his heart cracking under the weight of this child's desperate plea. Before he could react further, a sharp crack echoed across the water, followed by the distinctive whine of a bullet passing entirely too close to his head. The shot kicked up water just 3 feet away. Liam ducked instinctively, clutching the child to his chest. Another shot rang out, splintering the branch near his head. Someone was shooting at them, trying to finish what they'd started. Crouching low, Liam scanned the tree line on the opposite bank but saw nothing. Whoever was shooting knew the terrain, knew how to stay hidden. A third shot kicked up water closer still, and Liam realized they weren't going to stop until both he and the baby were dead. The creek bank on his side offered minimal shelter. A slight depression where erosion had carved out the dirt beneath gnarled tree roots. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. Holding the child close to his chest, Liam lunged for the overhang, sliding into the muddy hollow, just as another bullet struck the water where he'd been standing. His heart hammered against his ribs as he pressed his back against the cold earth. The baby in his arms was limp, her breathing shallow and irregular. Even in the dim light of their hiding place, Liam could see she was slipping away, her body temperature dangerously low from exposure. "I couldn't save my son," he whispered, the words emerging unbidden. "But I won't let you die." For the first time in 10 years, his medical training took over, pushing aside the rancher persona he'd adopted. The baby needed warmth immediately. Liam unzipped his coat with one hand, still holding her close with the other, and tucked her against his chest inside his flannel shirt. Her skin felt like ice against his, but he held her tight, willing his body heat to transfer to her tiny form. Next, he needed to stimulate her circulation. Keeping one ear alert for sounds of their attacker approaching, Liam began to gently massage the baby's limb, coaxing blood back into her extremities. Her skin was mottled with cold, but as he worked, a hint of pink began to return to her fingers and toes. "Stay with me, little one," he murmured, his voice soft but urgent. "Just stay with me." Time seemed to stretch as they huddled in their makeshift shelter. Liam strained to hear movement on the bank above, but the only sounds were the rushing creek and the occasional distant bird call. After what felt like hours but was likely only 20 minutes, he risked peering over the edge of the hollow. The opposite bank stood empty, no sign of their attacker. Still, Liam waited another 10 minutes before slowly emerging from hiding. The baby stirred against his chest, her movements stronger now, a good sign. But she was far from safe. She needed medical attention immediately. Storm waited patiently where Liam had left him, stomping occasionally against the cold. Moving as quickly as he dared with his precious cargo, Liam mounted, keeping the baby secure inside his coat. He turned Storm toward town at a gallop, staying away from open areas when possible, using the tree line for cover. Millfield was a small town of barely 5,000 souls, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Liam had chosen it precisely because it was unremarkable, the perfect place to disappear. Now, as he rode down Main Street with a half-frozen baby hidden inside his coat, he felt every curious eye tracking his progress. Dr. Eleanor Reed's clinic sat at the far end of town, a modest white building with a small sign advertising family medicine. Liam had avoided the place during his years in Millfield, handling his own minor injuries and keeping his medical knowledge to himself. Now he practically fell from Storm's back in his haste to reach the clinic door. The reception area was empty, save for a middle-aged woman behind the desk, who looked up in surprise as Liam burst in, wild-eyed and breathless. "I need Dr. Reed now," he said, already unzipping his coat to reveal the baby. "She was in the creek tied in a sack. Someone tried to kill us both." The receptionist gasped, already reaching for the phone. "Dr. Reed, emergency," she called into the receiver before rushing around the desk. "Bring her here, let me see." Before Liam could respond, a door opened and Dr. Tew. Eleanor Reed emerged, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. She took in the scene with one glance, her professional demeanor taking over. "Exam room 1 immediately," she said, already moving down the hallway. Liam followed the baby still clutched to his chest. In the brightly lit exam room, he finally got a clear look at the child he'd rescued. Her skin was ghostly pale with a bluish tinge, her lips still showing signs of cyanosis. Dr. Reed gently took her from Liam's arms, placing her on the exam table. "How long was she in the water?" Dr. Reed asked as she efficiently unwrapped the soaked blanket from around the baby. "I don't know," Liam replied, suddenly feeling helpless without the child in his arms. "I found her maybe 45 minutes ago. The sack was partially submerged, caught on a branch." Dr. Reed nodded, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she examined the baby. "She's hypothermic and dehydrated. I need to get her temperature up slowly. Julie," she called to the receptionist who hovered in the doorway. "Warming blankets in the infant resuscitation kit." As Julie hurried away, Dr. Reed looked up at Liam. "You said someone tried to kill you both." Liam nodded grimly. "Shots fired from the opposite bank. I didn't see who it was, but they were a good shot. Too good for a hunter who mistook us for game." Dr. Reed's expression darkened. "I'm calling Sheriff Miller. This is attempted murder." As she reached for the phone on the wall, Liam felt a wave of unease. He'd spent 10 years avoiding attention, and now he was about to be at the center of a criminal investigation. But there was no avoiding it, not if he wanted justice for this child. Mr. Hayes, right? Dorit said as she dialed. You're from the Red Pine Ranch. Liam nodded, surprised she knew who he was. He'd been careful to keep to himself. Ranch hand, aren't you? She continued, her tone casual as she waited for the sheriff to pick up. Funny the way you checked her capillary refill and pupillary response when you first brought her in. Almost like you knew what you were looking for. Liam froze, caught off guard by her observation. He'd acted on instinct medical training, kicking in before he could stop himself. Sheriff's office, she said into the phone, her eyes still on Liam. This is Dr. Reed. I need Sheriff Miller at my clinic immediately. Attempted murder of an infant. She paused, listening. Yes, that's right. And tell him we may have a witness. As she hung up, the door to the clinic opened again, and a woman's voice called out from the reception area. Julie, I brought Dr. Reed's prescription refill. The voice stopped abruptly as its owner appeared in the doorway of the exam room, taking in the scene before her. Olivia Bennett stood frozen, her dark hair falling from a hasty bun, her eyes wide as she stared at the baby on the exam table. At 34, she was striking rather than conventionally pretty, with intelligent eyes and a determined set to her jaw. Liam knew her by sight. She taught at the local elementary school and volunteered at the children's center on weekends. They'd never spoken. Olivia, perfect timing, Dr. Reed said. I could use another pair of hands. Olivia seemed to shake herself from her shock, stepping fully into the room. What happened? She asked, already moving to assist Dr. Reed. While the doctor briefly explained, Liam found himself backing toward the door. His job was done. He'd brought the baby to safety. Now he could leave before questions were asked, before his carefully constructed identity began to unravel. Where do you think you're going, Mr. Hayes? Reed asked without looking up from the baby. Sheriff Miller will want your statement, and we may need you to identify the location exactly. Besides, she added, her voice softening slightly, she seems to have taken a liking to you. Liam looked down to find the baby's eyes open again, those startling blue orbs fixed on him. One tiny hand reached out, fingers grasping at air. Without thinking, he stepped closer, allowing her to grasp his finger. Her grip was surprisingly strong for a child so weakened. Ma, she whispered again, the sound breaking something inside him. She needs a name, Dr. Reed said quietly, at least until we figure out who she is. Olivia, who had been helping attach monitoring equipment, looked up. Hope, she said softly. She needs to be called Hope. Because that's what she is, isn't it? Hope that survived against all odds. Liam found himself nodding. Hope. He repeated the name, feeling right on his tongue. The clinic door opened again and heavy footsteps approached. Sheriff Thomas Miller filled the doorway, his imposing frame clad in the tan uniform of the county sheriff's department. At 60, with a face weathered by Texas sun, in 25 years in law enforcement, Miller had seen it all. But even his stoic expression faltered at the sight of the tiny patient. What in God's name, he murmured, removing his hat. Dr. Reed straightened up. Infant female, approximately 8 months old, found in a burlap sack in Miller's Creek. Hypothermic, dehydrated, but stable for now. And someone took shots at Mr. Hayes here when he rescued her. Sheriff Miller's sharp gaze swung to Liam. That true Hayes? Liam nodded, suddenly aware of how bizarre the story sounded. 3 shots, maybe 4, from the east bank of the creek where it borders the Ravenwood property. Ravenwood? Miller repeated, his expression darkening. That's Montgomery land. A heavy silence fell over the room. Edward Montgomery was Millfield's mayor and largest landowner, his family one of the founding members of the county. The Montgomerys owned the bank, half the businesses in town, and held considerable sway in state politics. Crossing them was something people simply didn't do. I'm not saying it was anyone from Ravenwood, Liam clarified. So that the shots came from that direction. Miller nodded, pulling out a small notebook. I'll need your full statement, and I'll need to see exactly where this happened. He paused, looking at the baby. Doc, what's her condition? Critical but stable, Dr. Reed replied. She'll need round-the-clock care for at least the next 48 hours. I'd send her to County General, but with this storm moving in. As if on cue, the windows rattled with a gust of wind, and snow began to fall, thick flakes swirling past the glass. Roads will be closed within the hour, Miller confirmed. You'll have to keep her here. Reed sighed, glancing at the monitors. I can't monitor her and see patients. I'll need help. I can stay, Olivia offered immediately. I don't have classes tomorrow. Teacher workday. To Liam's surprise, he heard his own voice joining hers. "I'll help too." 3 pairs of eyes turned to him in surprise. Liam was as startled by his offer as they were. For 10 years, he'd avoided any situation that might require emotional connection. Why was he volunteering now? But as Hope's tiny fingers tightened around his, he knew why. This child had awoken something he thought long dead. A fierce protectiveness, a need to ensure that at least one vulnerable life was saved on his watch. "Well," Dr. Reed said after a moment, "it seems our little Hope has quite the support team already." Sheriff Miller pocketed his notebook. "Hayes, I still need your statement, but it can wait until the baby's stabilized. I'll start looking into missing infants and check the area where you found her once this storm passes." As the sheriff turned to leave, Hope began to fuss, her face scrunching up in discomfort. Olivia reached for her, instinctively lifting her from the exam table with practiced ease. There, she murmured, cradling Hope against her shoulder. "You're safe now." As Olivia turned slightly to better support the baby's head, Liam noticed something, a small birthmark behind Hope's left ear shaped like a crescent moon, a distinctive mark unusual enough to be identifying. Olivia saw it too. Her entire body went rigid, her face draining of color. "Olivia," Dr. Reed asked, concern in her voice. "Are you all right?" "This mark," Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. "Behind her ear. It can't be." "What about it?" Liam asked, stepping closer. Olivia looked up, her eyes wide with shock. "My sister Sophie was a private nurse for the Montgomery family. She disappeared 9 months ago." Her voice dropped even lower. "Before she vanished, she sent me a photo of a newborn with this exact birthmark, with a message that said, 'If anything happens to me, find this baby.'" Silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft beeping of the monitors and the increasingly urgent howl of the wind outside. The storm was upon them now, both literally and figuratively. Liam met Sheriff Miller's gaze, seeing his own suspicions reflected there. What had begun as a rescue was quickly becoming something far more complicated and dangerous. Hope whimpered softly in Olivia's arms, oblivious to the storm she had ignited with her mere existence. Night had fallen by the time Hope was stabilized enough for Dr. Reed to feel comfortable stepping away. The storm raged outside, snow piling against the windows, wind whistling through the eaves of the old building. Sheriff Miller had left to check the roads, promising to return in the morning, weather permitting. Liam sat in a chair beside the makeshift crib Dr. Reed had arranged, watching the steady rise and fall of Hope's chest. Her color had improved dramatically in the past few hours, pink returning to her cheeks, her lips no longer showing the blue tinge of hypothermia. According to Dr. Reed, she was responding better than expected. A fighter, she'd called her. The door opened softly and Olivia entered, carrying 2 steaming mugs. "Dr. Reed is napping in her office," she said quietly, handing one of the mugs to Liam. "She said to wake her in an hour." Liam accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. Olivia pulled another chair close to the crib, her eyes fixed on Hope's sleeping form. "Tell me about your sister," Liam said after a moment of silence. Olivia's hands tightened around her mug. "Sophie was a pediatric nurse, brilliant, compassionate. She took a private position with the Montgomery family 9 months ago. Said the pay was too good to pass up." She took a shaky breath. 3 weeks later, she sent me that photo with the cryptic message. Then she vanished. Police said she'd packed some clothes to take in her car, said it looked like she'd left voluntarily. "But you don't believe that," Liam said. It wasn't a question. "Sophie wouldn't leave without telling me where she was going. We're all each other has since our parents died." Olivia's voice cracked slightly. "About a month after she disappeared, I started getting postcards. From Sophie, supposedly. From all over. Colorado, California, even Mexico. Saying she needed time away, was figuring things out." "You don't think she wrote them?" Olivia shook her head firmly. The handwriting was hers, but the words weren't. "Sophie and I have a code, something we've done since we were kids. If she's in trouble, she dots her I's with a tiny circle instead of a point. Every single postcard had those circled I's." Liam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside. "Have you told Sheriff Miller?" "I tried early on, but there was no evidence of foul play. Her car was gone, her apartment cleared out. The Montgomerys said she'd given notice, said she was moving out west." Olivia looked up, her eyes fierce, despite the tears gathering in them. But now there's Hope, with the exact same birthmark Sophie showed me. That can't be coincidence. Hope stirred in her sleep, making small sounds of distress. Without thinking, Liam reached into the crib, gently stroking her cheek with one finger. She settled immediately, turning toward his touch. "You're good with her," Olivia observed. Liam withdrew his hand as if burned uncomfortable with the observation. He'd revealed too much already today, let too many of his carefully constructed walls slip. "I should check the generator," he said abruptly, rising from his chair. "Make sure we don't lose power in this storm." He felt Olivia's eyes on him as he left the room, knew she was wondering about his sudden retreat. Let her wonder. The less anyone knew about him, the better. The clinic's small utility room housed an aging generator that hummed steadily, providing backup power. Liam checked the fuel levels and connections more for something to do than out of genuine concern. As he worked, he tried to make sense of the day's events. A baby abandoned to die. Shots fired to ensure she didn't survive. A missing nurse who might have sent a warning about this very child. And at the center of it all, the most powerful family in the county. Liam had fled Chicago to escape exactly this kind of dangerous entanglement with powerful people. He'd promised himself never again to get involved in a situation where the vulnerable were victimized by those with money and influence. Never again to put himself, or anyone he cared about, in the crosshairs. Yet here he was drawn inexorably into what was clearly a dangerous situation. Because of a baby with blue eyes who had whispered "Mama," and grabbed his finger with her tiny hand. When he returned to Hope's room, he found Olivia changing the baby's diaper with practiced ease. She looked up as he entered. "Dr. Reed left some formula and bottles in the staff kitchen," she said. "Could you prepare 4 ounces, warmed slightly?" Liam hesitated only briefly before nodding. In the small kitchen, he found the formula and carefully measured the powder, mixing it with warm water. He tested the temperature on his wrist, an action so deeply ingrained from his years as a pediatrician that he didn't even think about it. When he returned with the bottle, Olivia was cradling Hope in her arms, humming softly. She looked up with a grateful smile as Liam handed her the bottle, then watched in surprise as he gently adjusted her hold on the baby. "Support her head a bit more," he said, positioning her arm. "There, like that. It helps with digestion." Olivia gave him a curious look but followed his guidance. Hope took to the bottle immediately, sucking eagerly. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Hayes," she said quietly. "First you risk your life to save an abandoned baby. Then you show up with medical knowledge no ranch hand should have. Who are you really?" Liam stiffened, mentally cursing his carelessness. "Just someone who's picked up a few things over the years," he said, his tone making it clear the subject was closed. Olivia didn't press, but her eyes told him she wasn't fooled. "Well, whoever you are," she said after a moment, "Hope is lucky you found her." They fell into silence as Hope finished her bottle, her eyelids growing heavy with each swallow. When she was done, Olivia carefully positioned her on her shoulder to burp her. "I can take her," Liam offered, surprising himself again. "You should rest while she's sleeping." After a moment's hesitation, Olivia carefully transferred Hope to his arms. The baby settled against his chest with a contented sigh, her small body warm and trusting. Liam felt something shift inside him, a tectonic movement in a heart long frozen. "I'll be on the couch in the waiting room if you need me," Olivia said, stifling a yawn. "Wake me for the next feeding." Liam nodded, already gently patting Hope's back. When Olivia had gone, he lowered himself into the rocking chair in the corner, moving slowly so as not to disturb the now sleeping infant. In the dim light, with only the soft beeping of monitors and the howl of the wind outside, Liam found himself speaking softly to the child in his arms. "You've caused quite the stir, little one," he murmured. "Got half the town involved in your mystery already." Hope slept on one tiny hand curled against his shirt. "Someone wanted you gone," he continued, his voice barely a whisper, "which means you're important to someone else. The question is who and why." As if in response, Hope made a small sound in her sleep, nuzzling closer to his warmth. Liam found himself remembering another child who had once slept in his arms this way. His son Michael, with the same complete trust, the same innocent surrender to sleep. The memories he'd kept at bay for 10 years came flooding back. Michael's first steps, his contagious laugh, the way he'd called Daddy Watch before attempting some new feat of toddler daring. Jennifer's smile as she watched them together, her gentle reminders that not all of Liam's patients could be saved, But that didn't mean he should stop trying. Before he realized it, tears were sliding down his weathered cheeks, the first he'd allowed himself in years. I couldn't save them, he whispered to Hope. But I swear to you, I will protect you, whatever it takes. In that moment, in the quiet eye of both the literal and figurative storms surrounding them, Liam Hayes made a promise he hadn't thought himself capable of making ever again. A promise to care, to protect, to fight if necessary. A promise that would irrevocably change the careful isolation he'd built around himself. Outside, the wind howled its fury, and somewhere in the darkness, someone who had tried to kill this child was likely planning their next move. But in this moment, in this room, there was only a man who had lost everything, finding something unexpected. A reason to live beyond mere existence. Hope shifted in his arms, her breathing deep and regular. Liam adjusted his hold, settling in for the long night ahead. Sleep well, little fighter, he whispered. I've got you now. But morning broke clear and cold, the storm having blown itself out sometime in the pre-dawn hours. Snow blanketed the town of Millfield, transforming the modest buildings and bare trees into a winter wonderland. Under different circumstances, it might have been beautiful. Liam stood at the window of Hope's room, watching as the first townsfolk began the process of digging out. The baby was awake in her crib, making soft cooing sounds as she played with a stuffed bear. Dr. Reed had found in her office. Overnight, Hope had shown remarkable improvement. Her temperature was normal, her appetite strong, her eyes bright and curious. Looking at her now pink-cheeked and alert, it was hard to believe she was the same half-dead infant he'd pulled from the creek just yesterday. Hard to believe someone had tried to murder this perfect, innocent child. The door opened and Dr. Reed entered, followed by Sheriff Miller. The sheriff's uniform was dusted with snow, his expression grim. How is she this morning? Reed asked, moving to check Hope's vital signs. Strong, Liam replied. She took 6 ounces at the 5 a.m. feeding and has been alert since, bro. Reed nodded approvingly. Remarkable resilience, she's going to be fine physically at least. She glanced at Sheriff Miller. The question is, what happens next? The sheriff removed his hat, turning it in his large hands. I've been to the creek this morning. Found the spot where Hayes says he found her. Evidence confirms his story. Footprints the branch where the sack caught. He paused. Also found 3 bullet casings on the east bank. 9mm high-quality ammunition. Not your standard hunting rounds. Military grade, Liam asked, his suspicion growing. Miller's eyebrows rose slightly at the question. Similar, he confirmed. The kind used by professional security details or law enforcement. He studied Liam with increased interest. You know your ammunition, Hayes. Liam cursed silently. Another slip. Grew up hunting, he said shortly. You learn to recognize different loads. Miller didn't look convinced, but continued his report. I've put out inquiries about missing infants. Nothing so far in our county or the surrounding ones. No reports of a missing baby girl matching her description. What about Rebecca Montgomery? Olivia's voice came from the doorway. She stood there, her hair damp from a recent shower, her expression determined. She's been away at boarding school for 9 months now? Convenient timing, don't you think? Sheriff Miller's expression grew even more serious. That's a serious implication, Miss Bennett. The Montgomerys are the most powerful family in the county I know, Olivia interrupted. But my sister worked for them, showed me a photo of a baby with the exact same birthmark as Hope, and then vanished. Now this baby turns up in a sack in the creek that runs through Montgomery property. And someone with professional-grade ammunition tried to make sure she didn't survive being found, Liam added quietly. That doesn't sound like a desperate mother abandoning her child. That sounds like someone cleaning up loose ends. Dr. Reed cleared her throat. Sheriff, I've completed my examination of Hope. There's something else you should know. She hesitated, glancing at the baby. There are signs of previous mistreatment, healed fractures in 2 ribs, and bruising in various stages of healing on her back and arms. Some of these injuries are weeks old. A heavy silence fell over the room. Liam felt a cold fury building inside him, a feeling he hadn't experienced since the night he'd lost his family. Someone had hurt this child repeatedly, deliberately, before trying to kill her. I need to report this to Child Protective Service, Dr. Reed continued. But with the roads still partially blocked, it will be at least tomorrow before they can send someone. She needs to stay somewhere safe until then, Sheriff Miller said. Somewhere not obvious. If someone's trying to eliminate her, they might try again. She can stay with me, Olivia offered immediately. I have everything she needs at my house. I kept all the baby supplies from when my sister-in-law visited with her infant last summer. Sheriff Miller shook his head. Your connection to Sophie makes you too obvious a choice. If someone's looking for this baby, your house would be one of the first places they'd check. She can come to the ranch with me. Liam said the words out before he could think better of them. I've got a cabin set back from the main house, private, secure. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him in surprise. You sure about that, Hazel? Miller asked. Taking care of an infant is a big responsibility. I won't be alone, Liam said, looking at Olivia. Ms. Bennett can come too, for the baby's sake. Olivia seemed startled by the suggestion but quickly recovered. Of course, Hope needs both of us right now. Dr. Reed considered the arrangement. Medically, she's stable enough to be moved, and I can come check on her daily. She looked at Sheriff Miller. What do you think, Thomas? The sheriff considered for a long moment. It's not standard procedure, but then again, nothing about this case is standard. He nodded slowly. All right, we'll move her to Hayes' cabin this afternoon. I'll have a deputy patrol the area regularly. Hope gurgled happily from her crib, reaching up toward the adults discussing her fate. Liam moved to her side, allowing her to grasp his finger. Those blue eyes, so trusting and innocent, looked up at him with complete faith. It's settled then, he said quietly. She comes home with me. The words felt strange on his tongue. Home was not a concept he'd allowed himself for a decade. His cabin was a place to sleep, nothing more. But perhaps for Hope's sake it could become something else. A sanctuary, a place of healing, or given what they were potentially up against, a fortress against those who would harm her. Either way, Liam Hayes had just taken another step away from the isolated existence he'd cultivated for so long. And strangely, he felt no regret, only a growing resolve to protect the child who had, against all odds, found her way into his care, and perhaps, though he wasn't ready to admit it yet, into his heart as well. The journey to Red Pine Ranch was tense, every shadow along the snow-covered road a potential threat. Sheriff Miller led the way in his patrol car while Liam drove his old pickup truck with Olivia in the passenger seat. Hope secured in an infant car seat Dr. Reed had provided. Liam's cabin sat a quarter-mile from the main ranch house, nestled among a stand of pine trees that gave the property its name. Simple but solid, with a wide porch and sturdy wall, it had been his sanctuary for 10 years. Now, as he carried Hope across the threshold and Olivia following with arms full of supplies, it felt like a different place entirely. It's nice, Olivia said, glancing around the Spartan interior. A worn leather couch faced a stone fireplace. A small kitchen occupied one corner, a dining table with 2 chairs in another. Through an open door, she could see a bedroom with a neatly made bed. Everything was clean but minimal, a place for existing, not living. It'll do, Liam replied, already settling Hope into a makeshift crib he'd fashioned from a drawer lined with blankets. Bathroom's through there. You can take the bedroom. I'll sleep on the couch. Sheriff Miller entered behind them, surveying the space with a professional eye. Defensible, he noted approvingly. Good sightlines, solid walls. I'll have Deputy Carson drive by every few hours. He turned to Liam. Still got that shotgun I know you keep, Hayes? Liam nodded toward a cabinet beside the fireplace. Locked and loaded. Good. Miller handed Olivia a radio. Cell service out here is spotty. Use this if you need to reach me or the station. Channel 3. He paused, his weathered face serious. I'm looking into the Montgomery angle, but discreetly. If they're involved, I need solid evidence before making any moves. After the sheriff left, a strange silence descended on the cabin. Olivia busied herself unpacking the supplies they'd brought. Formula diapers, baby clothes donated by Dr. Reed's nurse. Liam built a fire, the familiar task helping to settle his nerves. Hope watched them both from her makeshift crib, her expression solemn, as if she sensed the gravity of the situation. When the fire was crackling steadily, Liam approached the crib, and Hope immediately reached for him, her tiny face lighting up with a smile. Without thinking, he lifted her into his arms, settling her against his shoulder with practiced ease. Only when he turned to find Olivia watching him with undisguised curiosity did he realize he'd given himself away again. You've done that before, she said, not a question, but a statement. held babies, cared for them. Liam considered deflecting again, but found himself too tired for the pretense. A long time ago, he admitted. You were a doctor, weren't you? Olivia pressed gently. I saw how you checked her reflexes this morning, how you knew exactly where to look for signs of previous injuries. That's not something you pick up casually. Hope squirmed in his arms, and Liam adjusted his hold, automatically supporting her head with practiced precision. The evidence against him mounted with every instinctive movement. If we're going to protect her together, Olivia continued, I need to know who you really are. We both have secrets, Mr. Hayes, but Hope's life might depend on us trusting each other. She was right, and Liam knew it. Still, the words stuck in his throat. He hadn't spoken of his past to anyone in 10 years, had built walls so high around those memories that even he rarely scaled them anymore. Hope made a soft sound against his neck, her breath warm and trusting. For her sake, he would try. My name is Liam Hayes, he began, his voice rough with disuse. Dr. Liam Hayes. I was a pediatric specialist at the Children's Protection Center in Chicago. He swallowed hard. I specialized in cases of child abuse, worked with law enforcement to build cases against perpetrators. Olivia's eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing, allowing him to continue at his own pace. 10 years ago, I testified in a high-profile case against the son of a prominent Chicago family. 3 days later, my house burned down with my wife, Jennifer, and my 5-year-old son, Michael, inside. The words felt like glass in his throat, sharp and painful. The official report called it an electrical fire, but the timing was too convenient. You think they were murdered? Olivia said softly. Because of your testimony. Liam nodded, not trusting himself to speak further. Hope stirred in his arms, sensing his tension, and he forced himself to relax, to breathe normally. I'm so sorry, Olivia said, genuine compassion in her voice. That's why you're hiding here, isn't it? Why you've been living as a ranch hand all these years? I couldn't prove anything, Liam continued after a moment. And without proof, what was the point? They were gone. Nothing would bring them back. He looked down at Hope, her blue eyes now drooping with sleep. I promised myself I'd never get involved again, never put myself in a position where powerful people could take away someone I cared about. The admission hung in the air between them, that against all odds, against his better judgment, he had come to care for the child in his arms. And yet here you are, Olivia said quietly, protecting Hope, standing against the Montgomerys if they're involved. Here I am, Liam agreed, his voice barely audible. God help me. Olivia stepped closer, her expression earnest. You're not alone this time, she said. I'm looking for answers too. For Sophie, for Hope. We're stronger together. Before Liam could respond, Hope began to fuss in his arms, her face scrunching up with hunger. The moment of vulnerability passed as they shifted into caregiving mode, Olivia preparing a bottle while Liam soothed the increasingly vocal infant. As night fell, they established a tentative routine, working together to care for Hope with a coordination that belied their short acquaintance. Olivia's experience with her niece complemented Liam's medical knowledge, creating a partnership that felt surprisingly natural. After Hope's evening feeding, Liam found himself on the porch watching the stars emerge above the snow-covered landscape. The night was crisp and clear, the air so cold it hurt to breathe deeply. Behind him through the window, he could see Olivia gently rocking Hope to sleep, humming a lullaby barely audible through the glass. The domesticity of the scene struck him with unexpected force. For 10 years he'd lived like a ghost present, but not truly participating in life. Now in the span of 24 hours, his carefully constructed isolation had been shattered by a baby in a burlap sack and a determined schoolteacher with secrets of her own. More dangerously still, he found himself not minding the intrusion. The door opened softly behind him, and Olivia stepped out, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the cold. She's asleep, she said, joining him at the railing. Went down easily. Liam nodded, still looking at the stars. She feels safe now. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the only sound the occasional creak of the old cabin settling and the distant hoot of an owl. When I was a boy, Liam found himself saying, my father told me that stars were windows into heaven where our loved ones could look down on us. He smiled faintly at the memory. It's not true, of course. Just a comforting lie parents tell children to explain death. I don't know, Olivia said thoughtfully. Science can explain what stars are, but not what they mean to us. Maybe they can be both. Burning balls of gift in windows for those we've lost. Liam glanced at her, surprised by the sentiment. Is that what you tell your students? I tell them that science explains how things work, but not why they matter. She smiled slightly. I teach fifth grade. They're old enough for some ambiguity. A comfortable silence fell between them again. In the distance, a vehicle approached, its headlights sweeping across the snow. Likely Deputy Carson on his patrol. It passed without stopping, continuing down the county road. We should get some rest, Liam said finally. Hope will be up for another feeding in a few hours. Olivia nodded but made no move to go inside. I keep thinking about Sophie, she said, her voice tight with emotion. If the Montgomerys did this, if they hurt Hope and took my sister, I need to know why. What could be so important that they'd go to these lengths? Power, Liam said simply. People with power will do almost anything to keep it. I learned that in Chicago. But what power does a baby threaten? Olivia persisted. And why keep Sophie? Why not just... She couldn't finish the sentence. I don't know, Liam admitted, but we'll find out. For Hope's sake, for Sophie's. Olivia turned to him, her expression earnest in the starlight. Thank you, she said softly, for not turning away, for helping us both. Before he could respond, a sound from inside the cabin caught their attention. Hope's cry suddenly sharp and distressed. They both moved at once, rushing inside to find the baby thrashing in her makeshift crib, her face contorted with pain. Liam reached her first, lifting her with careful hands. Even through her clothing, he could feel the heat radiating from her small body. She's burning up, he said, his doctor's instincts taking over. Get the thermometer from the medical kit. Olivia hurried to comply while Liam gently examined Hope, his fingers probing with practiced care. The baby continued to cry, her usual robust wail, now weaker, more pitiful. 103.2. Olivia reported reading the digital thermometer. That's dangerously high for an infant, isn't it? Liam nodded grimly, already moving toward the bathroom. Run lukewarm water in the sink, he instructed. Not cold, that would shock her system. We need to bring her temperature down gradually. As Olivia adjusted the water, Liam carefully undressed Hope, speaking to her in soft, soothing tones. It's all right, little fighter. We're going to make you feel better. Together they bathed the feverish child, Liam supporting her head and body, while Olivia gently sponged her with the tepid water. Hope's cries diminished to whimpers, her blue eyes glazed with fever, but still tracking Liam's face as if drawing comfort from his presence. What's causing this? Olivia asked, worry evident in her voice. She was fine just hours ago. Liam's mind raced through possibilities. Infection from her time in the cold water, a reaction to the trauma, or something more sinister. Without proper medical equipment, he couldn't be sure. We need to get her back to Dr. Reed, he decided. This could be serious. But as they prepared to leave, headlights swept across the cabin windows again, not passing this time, but turning into the driveway. Liam handed Hope to Olivia and moved to the window, peering cautiously through the curtains. A black SUV with tinted windows had parked beside his truck. Two men in dark suits emerged, their movements precise and professional. Even from a distance, Liam could see the telltale bulge of shoulder holsters beneath their jackets. Who is it? Olivia whispered, clutching Hope to her chest. Trouble, Liam replied grimly, already moving toward the cabinet where he kept his shotgun. Take Hope to the bedroom, lock the door, and call Sheriff Miller on the radio, now. As Olivia retreated with the feverish child, Liam checked the shotgun, making sure it was loaded. 10 years of peace were about to end, it seemed. But this time he wasn't running. This time he had something, someone to protect. The men approached the porch with measured steps, their breath clouding in the cold night air. One reached inside his jacket, and Liam tensed, finger tightening on the trigger. But instead of a weapon, the man withdrew an identification wallet, holding it up to the porch light. Dr. Hayes, he called, his voice carrying clearly in the still night. My name is Agent Daniel Foster, FBI. We need to talk about the baby you found, and about the Montgomerys. Liam remained perfectly still, the shotgun steady in his hands. Trust didn't come easily after 10 years of hiding and conveniently timed federal agents. Seemed too good to be true. Show me that ID again, he called through the door. Both of you, slowly. The men complied, holding their credentials toward the window where Liam could see them clearly. They appeared genuine, but Liam had learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. "Call Sheriff Miller," he instructed over his shoulder to Olivia. "Ask him to verify their identities." From the bedroom, he heard Olivia's voice on the radio, urgent but controlled. Hope's whimpers provided a pitiful counterpoint to the tension of the moment. "They say they're FBI," Olivia was saying. "Foster and Sullivan. Can you confirm?" After what seemed like an eternity, Sheriff Miller's voice crackled over the radio. "They're legit, Olivia. I've been working with them. Let them in." Liam lowered the shotgun slightly but didn't put it away. Federal agents or not, trust would have to be earned. He opened the door just enough to speak through the gap. "The baby is sick," he said without preamble. "She needs medical attention immediately." Agent Foster nodded, his expression serious. "We have a doctor with us in the car. She can help, but we need to move quickly. You're not safe here anymore." "What do you mean?" Liam demanded, still blocking the entrance. "Vincent Taylor, Mayor Montgomery's head of security, has been asking questions around town," the second agent, Sullivan, explained, "about a ranch hand who might have found something by the creek. It won't take him long to connect the dots to you." From the bedroom, Hope's cries grew more distressed. Liam felt trapped between impossible choices: trust these strangers or risk Hope's health by delaying treatment. In the end, it was Hope who made the decision for him. Her cries suddenly changed pitch, becoming weaker, more gasping. Liam recognized the sound immediately. A child struggling to breathe. "Get your doctor," he said, pulling the door open. "Now." As Agent Sullivan hurried back to the SUV, Foster stepped inside, his sharp eyes taking in the cabin's interior with a professional assessment. "We've been investigating the Montgomerys for 2 years," he explained quickly. "Money laundering, corruption, suspected human trafficking. But we've never been able to get close enough for solid evidence." "Human trafficking." Olivia emerged from the bedroom. Hope clutched to her chest. The baby's breathing was labored now, her small face flushed with fever. Foster's expression darkened. "We believe Rebecca Montgomery gave birth to that child approximately 8 months ago. The family covered it up, sent Rebecca away supposedly to boarding school. But there's more to it than simple reputation management." Before he could elaborate, the door opened again and a woman entered, mid-40s with short gray-streaked hair and the brisk efficiency of a medical professional. She carried a black doctor's bag, which she set down immediately upon seeing Hope. "I'm Dr. Langley," she said, already moving toward Olivia and the baby. "FBI medical consultant. Let me see her." Liam watched with a critical eye as Dr. Langley examined Hope, her movements precise and practiced. She listened to the baby's chest with a stethoscope, checked her throat, tested her reflexes. "Pneumonia," she diagnosed, looking up at Liam. "Early stages, but moving fast. Her immune system is already compromised from exposure and previous malnutrition." She reached into her bag, withdrawing a vial and syringe. "She needs antibiotics immediately, and we should get her to a proper medical facility." "How do I know that's really antibiotics?" Liam challenged, still unwilling to trust completely. "Doctor." Langley met his gaze steadily. "You're a doctor, aren't you? Check the vial yourself. Ampicillin, standard pediatric formulation." Liam took the vial, examining it carefully. The label matched what she claimed, the liquid clear and without suspicious particulates. Still, he hesitated. "You worked at the Children's Protection Center in Chicago," Foster said quietly. "Specialized in abuse cases. Lost your family after testifying against the Carmichael family. We know who you are, Dr. Hayes, and right now we're that baby's best chance." The mention of his past, spoken so matter-of-factly, sent a chill through Liam. But the agent was right. Hope needed help now. "Give her the antibiotics," he decided, handing the vial back to Dr. Langley. "But we're not going anywhere until Sheriff Miller arrives to escort us." Foster nodded as if he'd expected this condition. "Already arranged. He's on his way," as Dr. Langley administered the medication. Hope's cries softened to whimpers, her eyes still fixed on Liam, as if seeking reassurance. He moved closer, allowing her to grasp his finger with her tiny hand. "It's going to be all right, little fighter," he murmured. "I promise to protect you, and I will." Olivia stepped to his side, her shoulder brushing his in silent solidarity. Together they stood watch as the federal agents secured the perimeter of the cabin, waiting for Sheriff Miller to arrive, united in their determination to keep Hope safe. The night stretched long before them, full of uncertainty and danger. But for the first time in 10 years, Liam Hayes was no longer running from his past. He was standing his ground, fighting for a future, not just Hope's, but perhaps his own as well. The FBI safe house was a modest farmhouse 30 miles outside of Millfield, isolated enough for security, but close enough to civilization for convenience. Inside, Hope slept peacefully in a proper crib, her fever reduced to a mild elevation thanks to Dr. Langley's intervention. Olivia sat beside her, gently stroking the baby's soft hair, while Liam paced the perimeter of the room, checking windows and exits with the vigilance of a man who had learned the hard way that safety was never guaranteed. Sheriff Miller stood by the fireplace, his weathered face grave as he conferred in low tones with Agents Foster and Sullivan. Dr. Langley had retreated to the kitchen to prepare more medication for Hope, leaving the four of them to discuss the situation. "Start from the beginning," Liam said, finally stopping his restless movement to face the FBI agents. "You said you've been investigating the Montgomerys for 2 years." Why, Agent Foster, tall and lean with the no-nonsense demeanor of a career law enforcement officer, nodded. "Edward Montgomery isn't just the mayor of a small town in Texas. He's part of a network of wealthy families across 3 states involved in money laundering, political corruption, and more recently what we believe to be human trafficking." "Human trafficking?" Olivia's voice was sharp with disbelief. "In Millfield?" "Not in Millfield specifically," Agent Sullivan clarified. He was shorter than his partner, with salt and pepper hair and calculating eyes that missed nothing. "The town is just one node in a larger operation. We believe Montgomery uses his bank to launder money from these operations." Sheriff Miller cleared his throat. "I've been feeding them information for the past 8 months, he admitted, after I noticed some irregularities in missing persons cases connected to the Montgomery estate. "Like Sophie," Olivia said quietly. "Like your sister," Miller confirmed, "and 3 other young women before her. All nurses or caretakers hired by the Montgomery family who supposedly resigned and moved away." Liam's mind was racing, connecting dots with the precision that had once made him an expert witness in abuse cases. "The baby," he said. "Hope, you think she's connected to this trafficking operation?" Foster and Sullivan exchanged glances. "Not exactly," Foster said carefully. "We believe Hope is Rebecca Montgomery's biological child, born approximately 8 months ago, right around the time your sister disappeared, Ms. Bennett." "But why would they try to kill an innocent baby?" Olivia asked, her hand still protectively resting on Hope's small form. "Even if she was born out of wedlock, surely in this day and age—" "It's more complicated than that," Sullivan interjected. "We have reason to believe the father of the child is Daniel Williams, a graduate student who worked as a tutor for Rebecca last year." "Williams," Sheriff Miller's head snapped up. "Any relation to Marcus Williams, the civil rights attorney who's been investigating the Montgomerys for discriminatory lending practices?" Sullivan nodded grimly. "His son." The implication hung heavy in the air. Liam voiced it first. "So Rebecca Montgomery, daughter of a powerful white family with alleged ties to criminal enterprises, had a child with the son of the black attorney who was investigating her father. Edward Montgomery is known in certain circles for his traditional views on race," Foster said diplomatically. "We believe Rebecca was sent away not just because of the pregnancy, but because of who the father was." Olivia gasped softly, looking down at Hope with new understanding. The baby's fair skin and blonde hair had given no hint of mixed heritage, but looking closer, Liam could see subtle features that might suggest it. The shape of her nose, the fullness of her lips. "But that still doesn't explain trying to kill her," Liam pressed. "Or keeping Sophie Bennett and the other nurses captive, if that's what's happening. We think Montgomery initially planned to have the baby adopted out quietly, preserving the family's reputation while disposing of what he saw as an embarrassment," Sullivan explained. "But somewhere along the line, something changed." "Rebecca," Olivia suggested. "Maybe she wanted to keep her baby." Foster nodded. "That's our theory. Rebecca may have bonded with her child and resisted the adoption plan. Sophie, as her nurse during the pregnancy and birth, would have been a witness to whatever happened next." "And the other missing nurses?" Liam asked. "We believe they may have been involved in caring for Rebecca during her absence at boarding school," Foster replied. "Montgomery has a remote property, a hunting lodge deep in the woods about 50 miles from here. Our intelligence suggests that's where Rebecca spent her pregnancy and possibly where she remains now." Sheriff Miller shifted uncomfortably. "We've been trying to get a warrant to search the place, But Montgomery's connections run deep. Every judge we've approached has found a reason to deny us. Until now, Sullivan added, Hope changes everything. Physical evidence of the child's signs of abuse, attempted murder. It's enough to push this case forward. Liam exchanged glances with Olivia, seeing his own realization mirrored in her eyes. So Hope is more than just an abandoned baby, he said softly. She's evidence. Exactly, Foster confirmed. Evidence that could bring down not just Edward Montgomery, but potentially an entire network of corruption and trafficking, which is why they tried to kill her, and why they'll try again if they discover she's alive. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by Hope's soft breathing from the crib. Liam moved to stand beside Olivia, both of them looking down at the sleeping infant whose existence threatened a powerful criminal enterprise. What about Daniel Williams? Olivia asked suddenly. The father? Does he know about Hope? Sullivan's expression darkened. Daniel Williams disappeared 3 months ago. His father has been searching for him, convinced the Montgomerys are involved, but there's been no trace. Another victim then. Another life potentially destroyed by the Montgomerys' determination to protect their power and secrets. Liam felt the familiar cold anger rising in his chest, the same righteous fury that had driven him to testify against the Carmichael family in Chicago, despite the risks. What happens now, he asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. We keep Hope safe until we can secure the warrants, Foster answered. Her DNA will establish paternity and connection to both Rebecca and Daniel. That, combined with your testimony about finding her and being shot at, should be enough to move against Montgomery. And Sophie, Olivia's voice cracked slightly on her sister's name. What about finding her? The warrant will cover the hunting lodge, Miller assured her. If she's there, we'll find her. If she's still alive, Olivia whispered, the fear she'd been holding at bay finally breaking through. No one contradicted her. The grim reality was that after 9 months in Montgomery's custody, Sophie's survival wasn't guaranteed. The same was true for Daniel Williams and the other missing nurses. Hope stirred in her sleep, making a small sound of distress. Immediately, both Liam and Olivia leaned closer to their instincts to comfort, perfectly synchronized despite their short time as her caretakers. Hope settled again at Olivia's gentle touch, her tiny features relaxing back into peaceful slumber. She trusts you both, Doctor. Langley observed from the doorway where she'd returned with medication. That's remarkable, considering what she's been through. Children are resilient, Liam replied, his voice soft with remembered knowledge, especially when they feel safe. And she does feel safe with you, Dr. Langley agreed, which is why you both need to stay with her, at least for now. Familiar faces, consistent care. It's critical for her recovery, both physical and psychological. Foster nodded. We've arranged for you both to remain here with Hope until we secure the warrants. Should be 72 hours at most. We'll have agents on site 24/7 for protection. It was the logical course of action, but Liam felt a flicker of unease. Remaining here meant continuing to be involved, continuing to care for Hope, continuing to risk the emotional attachment he'd sworn to avoid after losing his family. Yet as he looked down at her sleeping form, he knew there was no real choice to make. He was already involved, already invested in her survival and well-being. The walls he'd built around his heart had been breached the moment he pulled her from that sack in the creek. We'll stay, he said, simply glancing at Olivia for confirmation. She nodded without hesitation, her determination matching his own. Good, Foster said. We'll have agents bring your personal effects from the cabin. For now, try to get some rest. There's a bedroom down the hall for each of you, and we've set up a nursery for Hope, adjacent to Ms. Bennett's room. As the others filed out, Olivia carefully lifted Hope from the crib, cradling her with practiced tenderness. I'll get her settled, she said to Liam. You should sleep. You haven't rested since you found her. Liam nodded, suddenly aware of the bone-deep exhaustion that had been hovering at the edges of his consciousness. Wake me when she needs her next feeding, he said. Olivia smiled softly. I will. Left alone in the living room, Liam sank onto the couch, his body heavy with fatigue, but his mind still racing. The Montgomerys trafficking missing nurses, a mixed-race baby hidden from the world. It was a tangled web of secrets and crimes with Hope at the center of it all. And now he was back in the thick of it once again, standing against powerful people who would stop at nothing to protect their interests. People who had already tried to kill once, who had made others disappear. The parallel to his past was inescapable, yet this time felt different. This time he wasn't fighting alone. With that thought, Liam finally allowed exhaustion to claim him, falling into a dreamless sleep for the first time in years. The next morning dawned clear and cold sunlight streaming through the farmhouse windows. Liam awoke disoriented, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings. Then the events of the past 48 hours came flooding back. Hope the Creek. The shooting, the FBI safe house. He sat up surprised to find he'd slept through the night. A quick glance at his watch confirmed it was past 8 a.m., far later than he typically rose. Moving quietly, he made his way toward the sound of soft voices coming from the kitchen. Olivia sat at the table, Hope secured in her lap, giving the baby small spoonfuls of what appeared to be mashed bananas. Agent Sullivan stood by the coffee maker watching the domestic scene with an expression that suggested he found it both touching and incongruous in the midst of a federal investigation. "Good morning," Liam said, his voice still rough with sleep. Hope's head turned at the sound, her face lighting up with a smile that sent an unexpected warmth through Liam's chest. She reached for him, banana-covered fingers grasping at air, making small sounds of excitement. "Someone's happy to see you," Olivia said, smiling despite the dark circles under her eyes that suggested her night had been less restful than his. Liam approached, allowing Hope to grasp his finger. "You should have woken me for the night feeding," he chided gently. "You needed the rest," Olivia replied. "Besides, Dr. Langley helped. Her fever broke around 3 a.m., and she's been much better since." "Coffee," Sullivan offered, holding out a mug. Liam accepted gratefully, taking a seat beside Olivia. Hope immediately tried to climb from Olivia's lap to his, her determination comical, given her limited mobility. Without thinking, Liam set down his coffee and lifted her, settling her on his knee with practiced ease. "She's made a remarkable recovery, Doctor," Langley observed, entering the kitchen with a medical bag in hand. "I'd like to check her lungs once more, if you don't mind." Liam held Hope steady while the doctor listened to her chest and back. The baby cooperated with surprising patience, perhaps accustomed to medical examinations from her time before the creek. "Clear and strong," Dr. Langley pronounced, satisfaction evident in her voice. "The antibiotics have done their bomb. She'll need to continue the call, but the acute danger has passed." Relief flooded through Liam, stronger than he'd expected. He hadn't realized how worried he'd been until that worry was lifted. "Where's Agent Foster?" he asked, noticing the other agent's absence. Sullivan's expression tightened slightly. "He's at the federal courthouse in Dallas working on the warrants. We hit a snag overnight. Judge Harmon recused himself, citing a conflict of interest." "Let me guess," Liam said dryly. "The conflict is his connection to the Montgomerys." Sullivan nodded grimly. "Montgomery donated generously to his last campaign. We're presenting to Judge Keller now, but it's delayed us by several hours." "What about Sheriff Miller?" Olivia asked, wiping banana from Hope's chin with gentle efficiency. "Back in Millfield maintaining appearances," Sullivan replied. "If Montgomery suspects he's working with us, we lose our inside track on their movements." Hope began to fuss, clearly bored with the adult conversation. Liam bounced her gently on his knee, an automatic gesture that calmed her immediately. She looked up at him with those trust-filled blue eyes, and Liam felt another crack form in the walls around his heart. "I brought some of your things from the cabin," Sullivan continued, gesturing to 2 duffel bags by the door. "And supplies for the baby. We need you both to stay put until we have the warrants in hand, for your safety and Hope's." Liam nodded, understanding the necessity even as he chafed at the confinement. After years of solitude on the ranch, being restricted to the farmhouse felt claustrophobic despite its generous size. "What about your investigation into the trafficking angle?" he asked, trying to focus on the bigger picture. "You mentioned the Montgomerys were involved in a larger network." Sullivan hesitated, clearly weighing how much to share. "We believe young women are being brought into the country illegally through Montgomery's shipping connections. They're provided with false documentation and then placed as domestic help in wealthy households across 3 states. Modern slavery," Olivia said, her voice tight with anger. "Essentially, yes," Sullivan confirmed. "They work for little or no pay, their immigration status held over them as a threat. Many don't speak English, have no resources, no way to escape." "And the missing nurses," Liam pressed. "Sophie and the others. How do they fit in?" Sullivan's expression grew more grave. "We're not entirely sure. They might have witnessed something they shouldn't have, or..." or become victims themselves. Olivia finished her face pale but determined, forced into the same system they accidentally discovered. The possibility hung heavy in the air. Hope, sensing the tension, began to whimper softly. Liam adjusted his hold, cradling her against his chest in a gesture that had become instinctive in the short time she'd been in his care. "We'll find them," Sullivan assured Olivia, though Liam noted he carefully avoided making promises about finding them alive. "Once we have the warrants, things will move quickly." The day stretched before them, a strange bubble of domesticity surrounded by the tension of waiting. With Sullivan and another agent stationed outside, Liam and Olivia settled into caring for Hope, establishing a routine of feedings, naps, and play that created an illusion of normalcy amid extraordinary circumstances. By late afternoon, Hope was thriving, her energy and appetite fully restored. She sat on a blanket in the living room, happily exploring a set of plastic keys Agent Sullivan had produced from somewhere. Liam watched her from the couch, marveling at her resilience. After all she'd been through, abandonment, exposure, illness, she still found joy in simple things, still trusted the adults around her to keep her safe. Olivia joined him, handing him a cup of tea before sitting beside him. "She's amazing, isn't she?" she said softly, following his gaze to Hope. "Most adults wouldn't recover so quickly from what she's experienced." "Children live in the present," Liam replied, his voice distant with memory. "It's both their greatest vulnerability and their greatest strength." Olivia studied his profile, her expression thoughtful. "You were good at your job, weren't you, before?" "I was," Liam admitted, no false modesty in his tone. "I helped a lot of children, testified in dozens of abuse cases, put some very bad people behind bars." His mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "Until it cost me everything." Hope chose that moment to look up, offering them a gummy smile that melted something frozen inside Liam's chest. She waved the keys triumphantly, clearly expecting their appreciation of her achievement. "That's wonderful, Hope." Olivia encouraged, her smile genuine, despite the heaviness of their conversation. "Such a clever girl." Liam found himself smiling too, unable to resist the baby's infectious joy. "She's going to be walking soon," he observed. "She's got the determination for it." "Like someone else I know," Olivia said quietly, her eyes still on him. "Someone who survived his own tragedy and kept going." Liam tensed, uncomfortable with the parallel. "I didn't keep going," he corrected her. "I ran away, hid in a cabin for 10 years, avoiding any real human connection." "And yet here you are," Olivia countered. "You could have handed Hope over to Dr. Reed and walked away. You could have left when the FBI showed up. But you didn't. You stayed. You're fighting for her." Before Liam could respond, Hope began to crawl toward them, her movements determined if not entirely coordinated. When she reached the couch, she pulled herself up on unsteady legs, clinging to Liam's pant leg for support. Her face lifted to his eyes, bright with accomplishment. "Papa," she said clearly, the syllables deliberate and unmistakable. The room seemed to freeze. Liam stared down at Hope in shock, his heart hammering against his ribs. She'd said Mama before when he first found her, but this was different. This was directed at him, specific and intentional. "She's never said that before," Olivia whispered, her eyes wide. "Just Mama and some babbling." Hope bounced slightly on her wobbly legs, still gripping Liam's pants, still looking up at him expectantly. "Papa," she repeated, more insistent this time. With hands that weren't entirely steady, Liam lifted her onto his lap. "Hey there, little fighter," he said softly, his voice rougher than usual. "That's a new trick." Hope reached up to pat his cheek, clearly pleased with herself and his reaction. The simple gesture of affection, so innocent and trusting, threatened to undo him completely. "I think she's chosen you," Olivia said gently. "Children know who they can count on." Liam swallowed hard, unable to find words. After losing Michael, he'd sworn never to be a father again, never to love a child who could be taken from him. Yet here was Hope, dismantling that resolution with 2 simple syllables. The moment was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching outside. Agent Sullivan appeared in the doorway, his expression a mix of triumph and tension. "We got the warrants," he announced. "Foster's on his way back from Dallas now. We move on the Montgomery estate and the hunting lodge at dawn." Relief and apprehension mingled in Liam's chest. This was what they'd been waiting for. The chance to find Sophie and the others, to bring the Montgomerys to justice, to secure Hope's future. Yet it also meant confronting powerful enemies, people who had already tried to kill Hope once and wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone who stood in their way. Hope sensed the shift in mood, her small body tensing against Liam's chest. He rubbed her back soothingly, a gesture that had become second nature. "What do you need from us?" he asked Sullivan, his voice steady with renewed resolve. "Foster wants you both there when we move on the hunting lodge," Sullivan replied. "Miss Bennett to identify her sister if we find her, and you, Dr. Hayes, to document any medical evidence we uncover. Your expertise in abuse cases would be invaluable." Olivia nodded immediately, determination overriding fear. "I'll be there." Liam hesitated, looking down at Hope. "And what about her? She's the key witness in all this, even if she can't speak for herself yet. If something goes wrong, Dr. Langley will remain here with her, along with 2 agents. Somebody, Sullivan assured him. This location remains secure and unknown to the Montgomerys. It was the logical arrangement, yet Liam felt an irrational reluctance to leave Hope even in capable hands. In just 2 days, she had become, what? Not his child, certainly. Yet not simply a patient or a witness either. "Papa," Hope said again, her small hand curling around the collar of his shirt. "I'll go," Liam decided, meeting Sullivan's gaze. "But I want your word that Hope's safety is the absolute priority, no matter what else happens." Sullivan nodded solemnly. "You have it. That child is the heart of our case, not to mention an innocent victim in all this. We'll protect her with our lives if necessary." As the agent left to make final preparations, Liam and Olivia exchanged glances, the weight of what lay ahead heavy between them. "Are you sure about this?" Olivia asked softly. "Going back into the line of fire, after everything you have been through?" Liam looked down at Hope, now drowsing against his chest, utterly trusting in his protection. "I'm sure," he said quietly. "Some things are worth fighting for." For the first time in 10 years, he truly believed those words. Night fell, bringing with it a tense anticipation. Agent Foster had returned, and the farmhouse became a hub of activity as FBI personnel prepared for the dawn raid. Maps were spread across the dining table, tactical gear piled in corners. Voices kept low but urgent as plans were finalized. Liam sat in the nursery, watching Hope sleep peacefully in her crib, unaware of the storm gathering around her. Her fever was completely gone now, her breathing deep and regular. One small hand curled around the ear of the teddy bear Dr. Langley had produced from her seemingly bottomless medical bag. "She looks like an angel," Olivia said softly from the doorway. Liam nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The events of the past 48 hours had stripped away layers of protective numbness, leaving him raw and vulnerable in ways he hadn't been since before the fire. Olivia entered, taking the chair opposite his. In the soft glow of the nightlight, her face was drawn with worry but resolute. "I keep thinking about Sophie," she admitted, "about what she might have endured these past 9 months. If she's even still—" "Don't," Liam interrupted gently. "Don't go there yet. Your sister sounds like a remarkable woman. Strong, resourceful, the kind who survives." "She is," Olivia agreed, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. Is," she sighed, rubbing her temples. "I don't even know which tense to use anymore." "Use present," Liam advised, "until you know otherwise." They sat in companionable silence for a while, united in their vigil over Hope, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside the nursery, they could hear the murmur of voices as final preparations continued for the morning operation. "What happens after?" Olivia asked suddenly. "If we find Sophie, if the Montgomerys are arrested, what happens to Hope?" It was the question Liam had been avoiding, the future he couldn't bring himself to contemplate. "She'll likely go into the foster system," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Unless Rebecca wants custody or Daniel Williams is found alive." "The foster system," Olivia repeated, her tone making clear her thoughts on that option. After everything she's been through. Liam couldn't disagree. As a pediatrician specializing in abuse cases, he'd seen too many children further traumatized by an overloaded, understaffed system, despite the best intentions of many foster parents. "There might be another option," Olivia continued hesitantly. If we were to apply for temporary guardianship, both of us, I mean, just until permanent arrangements could be made." Liam looked up sharply, caught off guard by the suggestion. "Guardianship? It makes a certain sense," Olivia pressed on. "We've been caring for her successfully. She knows us, trusts us. And with your medical background and my experience as a teacher, the idea was simultaneously terrifying and compelling. Temporary guardianship would mean continuing to care for Hope, continuing to be responsible for her well-being, continuing to love her. Because that's what had happened, Liam realized with a jolt. Somehow in the space of 2 days, he had come to love this abandoned child as fiercely as if she were his own. It's just a thought, Olivia added quickly, misinterpreting his silence as rejection. I know it's a lot to ask, especially given your past. No, Liam said, surprising himself with the firmness of his tone. It's a good idea, the best option for Hope given the circumstances. He met Olivia's gaze directly. I'm in, if you are. Relief and something warmer flooded Olivia's expression. I am. Before they could discuss it further, Agent Foster appeared in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. Sorry to interrupt, he said quietly, but there's been a development. We need you both in the living room. The seriousness of his tone sent a chill through Liam. He rose immediately, casting one last glance at Hope's sleeping form before following Foster Olivia close behind. In the living room, Sheriff Miller stood beside Agent Sullivan, his uniform dusty and his expression grim. A map of the area was spread on the coffee table, various locations marked with red pins. What's happened? Liam asked without preamble. Miller looked up, his weathered face creased with concern. Vincent Taylor is mobilizing Montgomery's private security force. I overheard him on a call at the station. They know something's coming. How? Foster demanded. The warrants were just issued. The operation is on a need-to-know basis. I don't know, Miller admitted, but they're preparing for something. Taylor ordered men to both the main estate and the hunting lodge. Extra guards, extra weapons. Sullivan swore under his breath. We've got a leak somewhere. Or Montgomery has people in the court system who tipped him off about the warrants, Foster suggested, his expression darkening. Either way, we've lost the element of surprise. What does this mean for the operation? Olivia asked, her voice tight with renewed worry. Foster and Sullivan exchanged glances, a silent communication born of years working together. We move tonight, Foster decided. No more waiting for dawn. If they're fortifying their positions every hour, gives them more advantage. But you're not ready, Liam protested. You said the tactical team wouldn't be fully assembled until 5 a.m. We've got enough personnel for the hunting lodge, which is our primary target for finding the missing women, Sullivan explained. The estate raid will have to wait until the full team arrives. Liam didn't like it. Rushing in with limited resources against an alerted enemy was a recipe for disaster. But if Sophie and the others were at the hunting lodge waiting, it could mean losing them entirely. Montgomery might decide to move them, or worse, if he felt cornered. When do we leave? He asked, decision made. 30 minutes, Foster replied. Gear up. It's going to be a long night. As the room erupted into renewed activity, Liam caught Olivia's eye. The fear in her expression was outweighed by determination. Determination to find her sister, to secure justice for Hope, to see this through no matter the cost. Liam felt the same resolve hardening inside him. For 10 years, he'd hidden from conflict, from connection, from the risk of loss. But Hope had changed everything. She'd awakened something he thought long dead, the courage to fight for what mattered even against overwhelming odds. I'm going to check on Hope once more before we leave, he told Olivia. Meet you back here in 15. In the quiet of the nursery, Liam stood watching Hope sleep, memorizing every detail of her peaceful face. I'll be back, little fighter, he whispered. That's a promise. As he turned to leave, Dr. Langley entered with a medical bag. I've prepared a kit for you, she said, handing him the compact case. Basic emergency supplies in case you find anyone needing immediate attention. Thank you, Liam said, accepting the bag with a nod of appreciation. Take care of her while we're gone. Dr. Langley's expression softened. With my life if necessary. That child has quite the fighting spirit. Reminds me of another fighter I know. Her knowing look made it clear she meant him. Liam didn't contradict her, though fighter wasn't a word he would have used to describe himself for the past decade. Perhaps before in Chicago, when he'd faced down powerful families in court to protect abused children. But not since the fire. Not since he'd run away to hide in a Texas cabin. Yet now, preparing to face the Montgomerys and their private army, he felt that old fire rekindling. The determined resolve to stand against those who would harm the innocent, no matter the personal cost. For Hope, for Sophie, for all the women held captive by Montgomery's operation. And perhaps, though he wasn't ready to admit it fully for himself as well, for the man he'd once been and might become again. 20 minutes later, clad in a bulletproof vest provided by Sullivan, and with Dr. Langley's medical kit secured at his side, Liam climbed into one of 3 black SUVs idling outside the farmhouse. Olivia sat beside him, similarly outfitted in protective gear that seemed to emphasize her vulnerability rather than diminish it. "You okay?" he asked quietly as agents loaded equipment into the vehicles around them. Olivia nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Scared," she admitted, "but ready. Sophie would do the same for me." Foster slid into the driver's seat, Sheriff Miller beside him. "Remember," Foster instructed as he started the engine, "you both stay behind the tactical team at all times. No heroics. Your job is identification only. Ms. Bennett for her sister, Dr. Hayes, for medical assessment of any victims we find." "Understood," Liam confirmed, though a part of him wondered if he could truly remain on the sidelines if the situation turned volatile. The protective instinct that had lain dormant for so long was now fully awakened, extending beyond hope to encompass Olivia and the other potential victims. As the convoy pulled away from the farmhouse, Liam cast one last glance back at the window of Hope's nursery. Dr. Langley stood there, a silhouette in the soft light, one hand raised in farewell. Behind her, though he couldn't see it from this distance, Liam knew Hope slept peacefully, unaware of the danger and drama unfolding around her tiny life. "We're coming back," he promised silently. "All of us." The hunting lodge was deep in the woods, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that wound through dense pine forest. The convoy killed their lights for the final approach, relying on night vision equipment to navigate the treacherous path. Inside, the lead SUV tension mounted with each passing mile. "There's the perimeter fence," Miller murmured, pointing to a high chain-link barrier, barely visible in the darkness. "Electric with motion sensors. The main gate is half a mile ahead, usually guarded." Foster nodded, relaying the information via radio to the vehicles behind them. "Team 2, prepare for fence breach at the coordinates I'm sending now. Team 3, stand by for gate distraction." Liam felt his pulse quickening, the familiar surge of adrenaline he hadn't experienced since his courtroom days in Chicago. Beside him, Olivia's breathing had quickened, her fingers now gripping the edge of her seat. "You don't have to go in," he told her quietly. "You could wait here and let us identify Sophie." Olivia shook her head firmly. "I need to see her, to be there when she's found." The unspoken "if she's found alive" hung in the air between them. The SUV slowed to a stop, concealed among the trees 100 yards from the fence. "This is as far as we drive," Foster announced, turning in his seat to face them. "From here we proceed on foot. Stay close, stay quiet, and do exactly as we instruct. Lives depend on it." Outside the vehicle, the night was alive with subtle sounds. The rustle of tactical teams assembling, the soft crackle of radio communications, the distant hoot of an owl unaware of the human drama unfolding in its territory. Liam helped Olivia adjust her vest one final time, then checked his medical kit, ensuring everything was secure. "Ready?" Foster asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 4 simple nods answered him. With a hand signal to the others, he led them into the darkness toward whatever awaited at Montgomery's hunting lodge, and toward the truth about Hope's origins and Sophie's fate. The approach to the fence was tense but uneventful. Team 2 had successfully disabled a section of the electrified barrier, creating an opening large enough for them to pass through the single file. Beyond the hunting lodge loomed in the distance a massive structure of wood and stone windows, glowing with soft light despite the late hour. 4 guards visible, Sullivan murmured into his radio, after scanning the building with night vision binoculars. 2 at the main entrance, 2 patrolling the perimeter, unknown number inside. Thermal imaging shows approximately 15 heat signatures, another agent reported, clustered in what appears to be the main floor and basement. Foster nodded, processing the information. Team 3 execute distraction at the gate in 3 minutes. Team 2 prepare to neutralize perimeter guards. Primary team will breach the east entrance on my mark. Liam and Olivia were positioned with Sheriff Miller behind a dense stand of pines, far enough from the action to be relatively safe, but close enough to move in once the building was secured. The wait was excruciating, each second stretching into what felt like hours. "What if she's not there?" Olivia whispered, giving voice to her deepest fear. "What if we're too late?" Liam had no comforting platitudes to offer, only the hard-earned wisdom of his years working with victims. "One step at a time," he said quietly. "Whatever we find, we deal with it together." Before Olivia could respond, a distant explosion shattered the night. Team 3 creating their distraction at the main gate. Immediately, the two guards at the lodge entrance ran toward the sound weapons drawn. "Now!" Foster's voice came through their earpieces. "Go, go, go!" The raid unfolded with the precision of a well-rehearsed dance. Tactical teams converged on the building from multiple angles, neutralizing the remaining guards with non-lethal force before they could raise an alarm. The east entrance yielded to a battering ram, and agents poured into the lodge, their movements swift and coordinated. From their position in the trees, Liam, Olivia, and Sheriff Miller could hear muffled shouts, the occasional thud, but no gunfire. A good sign that resistance was minimal or non-existent. After what seemed an eternity, but was likely only minutes, Foster's voice came through their earpieces again. "Building secure. Upper floor clear. Moving to basement level now." Another agonizing wait followed. Olivia's hand found Liam's in the darkness, her fingers cold, but grip strong. He returned the pressure, offering what comfort he could in the face of such uncertainty. "Basement secure," Sullivan's voice finally reported. "We've got them. 5 women alive." "Repeat, 5 women found alive in basement containment area." Olivia's breath caught on a sob, hope and fear mingling in the sound. "Sophie," she whispered. "Is Sophie there?" As if in answer, Foster's voice crackled through the earpieces. "Dr. Hayes, Ms. Bennett, you're clear to approach. We need medical assessment and identification." Sheriff Miller led them from their hiding place toward the lodge, their path now illuminated by the tactical lights of FBI agents securing the perimeter. The massive wooden doors stood open, revealing a cavernous main hall, worthy of the lodge's grand exterior. But there was no time to take in the details. Miller was already leading them toward a door at the rear of the hall, beyond which a staircase descended into darkness. The basement of the hunting lodge was a stark contrast to the rustic luxury above. Concrete walls, harsh fluorescent lighting, a row of cell-like rooms with reinforced doors now standing open. FBI agents moved with purpose through the space, photographing evidence, collecting samples, speaking in low, urgent tones. And there, seated on a bench along one wall, were 5 women. They were thin, pale from lack of sunlight, dressed in plain scrubs-like garments, but undeniably alive. Each was wrapped in a shock blanket, being attended to by medical personnel from the FBI team. "Sophie," Olivia called, her voice breaking as she scanned the faces. "Sophie." One of the women looked up, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Liv," she whispered, rising unsteadily to her feet. Olivia broke into a run, crossing the space in seconds to embrace her sister. Sophie clung to her, both women dissolving into tears of relief and reunion. Liam hung back, allowing them their moment, while he surveyed the other women with a doctor's practiced eye. They appeared malnourished, but not severely so, with no obvious signs of physical abuse beyond the imprisonment itself. Their demeanor suggested psychological trauma, however. The hypervigilance, the flinching at sudden movements, the haunted look in their eyes that Liam had seen too many times in victims of prolonged captivity. Agent Foster approached his expression a mix of triumph and grim determination. "They've been here the entire time," he said quietly to Liam, "kept as witnesses and leverage against Rebecca Montgomery, who's being held at the main estate. According to Sophie Bennett, Rebecca gave birth here 8 months ago, then was forcibly separated from her baby and returned to the estate." "And Hope?" Liam asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Montgomery ordered Vincent Taylor to dispose of the baby," Foster confirmed. "Taylor outsourced the job to a local ex-con named Carl Jenkins, who was supposed to drown the infant in Miller's Creek. But Jenkins couldn't go through with killing a baby directly, so he put her in the sack, instead figuring exposure would do the job without blood on his hands." The cold calculation of it, the callous disregard for an innocent life, stirred the anger Liam had kept carefully banked for a decade. "In the shooting at the creek," Taylor himself, Foster said grimly. "Jenkins had reported the job done, but Taylor went to verify and arrived just as you were retrieving Hope. He tried to eliminate both of you to tie up loose ends." Olivia rejoined them, her arms still around Sophie, who looked pale but resolute. "Sophie can identify Montgomery and Taylor," she said. "She witnessed everything. Rebecca's captivity, the birth, the order to kill Hope." Sophie nodded, her voice hoarse but steady. "I switched the babies," she admitted. Montgomery never saw Hope after the birth. I told him she had a fatal heart defect that she died hours later. I showed him a stillborn from a medical textbook on my phone. Pride flickered across her exhausted features. I bought her time, hid her in the nursery for 2 weeks while I figured out how to get her to safety. But Taylor discovered the deception, Foster filled in, and Montgomery ordered both Sophie and the baby eliminated. I couldn't get her out, Sophie continued, anguish in her voice. They caught me trying to leave with her. Taylor took her. I thought she was dead. She looked at Liam with tear-filled eyes. You found her. She's alive. She's alive, Liam confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. Safe and healthy, thanks to your courage. Sophie's shoulders sagged with relief, tears streaming down her face. I knew someone would find her. I put my pendant on her, the crescent moon, hoping Olivia would recognize it when she was found. The birthmark, Olivia whispered. It wasn't a birthmark at all. A temporary tattoo, Sophie explained. From a kid in the nursery, I needed something distinctive, something that would connect her to me if the worst happened. The pieces clicked together in Liam's mind. The birthmark that had seemed so distinctive, that had led them to connect Hope to Sophie and ultimately to the Montgomerys. A simple tattoo placed by a desperate nurse trying to save an innocent child. What about Daniel Williams, he asked. Rebecca's boyfriend, the baby's father. Do you know what happened to him? Sophie's expression darkened. Montgomery's men took him the day he came looking for Rebecca. I overheard them talking. I think he's being held at the main estate too with Rebecca. Foster nodded grimly. Which is our next target once the full tactical team arrives at dawn? He checked his watch. 3 hours from now. In the meantime, we need to get these women to medical facilities and take their full statements. As agents began organizing the evacuation, Liam moved to examine the other nurses, his medical training taking precedence over his emotional turmoil. They were in remarkably good physical condition given their ordeal. Sophie had apparently used her medical knowledge to ensure they all received adequate nutrition and exercise despite their captivity. You kept them healthy, he observed, as he checked the vital signs of a young woman named Maria. Sophie nodded, a hint of professional pride breaking through her exhaustion. I convinced Montgomery they were worthless as hostages if they died of neglect. He allowed basic medical supplies, decent food. Her expression hardened. Not out of compassion, just practicality. You saved their lives, Liam said simply. And Hope's. Something shifted in Sophie's expression at the mention of Hope's name. Is that what you call her, Hope? It seemed fitting, Olivia explained, given the circumstances. Rebecca named her Emma, Sophie said softly. After her grandmother, she only held her for a few minutes before Montgomery had her sedated and the baby taken away. She looked between Liam and Olivia. She loves her daughter, has been fighting to find her ever since they told her the baby died. The revelation added another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation. Hope, or Emma, had a mother who loved her, who had been lied to and separated from her by force. A mother who might soon be rescued from her own captivity. One battle at a time, Foster reminded them, sensing their renewed concern. Right now, our priority is getting everyone safely out of here. The estate raid will proceed as planned at dawn. As they helped the women toward the waiting vehicles, Liam felt a strange mixture of triumph and trepidation. They had found Sophie and the other nurses alive. They had confirmation of Montgomery's crimes. Justice for Hope seemed within reach. Yet the hardest part still lay ahead, confronting Montgomery directly at his estate, rescuing Rebecca and Daniel, if they were indeed being held there, and ultimately determining Hope's future. A future that Liam realized with a pang might not include him and Olivia despite their growing attachment to the child. Hope had a mother who wanted her, a father who had risked everything to find her, biological parents who, if rescued, would have every legal right to reclaim their daughter. The thought was both right and painful, a reminder that his role in Hope's life had always been temporary, a bridge between trauma and reunion. Just as he'd told Olivia earlier, one step at a time. Whatever came next, they would face it together with Hope's best interests at heart. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting the forest in golden light, the convoy headed back toward the safe house, 5 rescued women in tow. The battle was half won, but the war for justice was far from over. And somewhere in that safe house, Hope slept peacefully, unaware that her world was about to change once again. Dawn broke over the FBI safe house, bathing the modest farmhouse in golden light. Liam stood at the window of Hope's nursery, watching the sunrise, while the baby slept peacefully in her crib. The raid on Montgomery's hunting lodge had been successful beyond their expectations. Sophie and 4 other nurses rescued valuable evidence secured, and most importantly, confirmation that Hope was indeed Rebecca Montgomery's daughter, deliberately marked by Sophie in a desperate attempt to save her life. Now they faced the next challenge, the raid on the Montgomery estate itself, where Rebecca and potentially Daniel Williams were being held. The full tactical team had assembled during the night, dozens of FBI agents, preparing for what promised to be a more complex and dangerous operation than the lodge raid. Hope stirred in her crib, her small face scrunching momentarily before relaxing back into sleep. Liam watched her with a mixture of fierce protectiveness and growing apprehension. If Rebecca and Daniel were rescued, what would that mean for Hope? For the unexpected bond that had formed between the baby himself and Olivia. The door opened softly and Olivia entered, her face showing the strain of the past hours, but also relief from her reunion with Sophie. "She's still sleeping," she whispered, joining Liam at the crib. He nodded, keeping his voice low. "The antibiotics make her drowsy. Dr. Langley says it's normal." "Sophie's resting too," Olivia said. "The other nurses have been taken to the hospital in Dallas, but she refused to go. Said she needed to be here when they bring Rebecca back." She paused, watching Hope's peaceful breathing. "She told me more about what happened at the lodge, about Rebecca and the baby." Liam turned to her, noting the conflict in her expression. "And Rebecca fought for her daughter," Olivia said quietly. "Montgomery drugged her after the birth, told her the baby had died. But she didn't believe it. She kept demanding to see the body, kept asking questions. That's why Montgomery had her essentially under house arrest at the estate. She was becoming too difficult to control." The revelation added another layer to the already complex situation. Not only was Hope a child born of love between Rebecca and Daniel, but her mother had never willingly abandoned her, had been fighting to discover the truth all along. "And Daniel Williams?" Liam asked, thinking of Hope's father. "Sophie believes he's alive, being held somewhere at the estate. He came looking for Rebecca about 3 months ago, discovered she wasn't really at boarding school. Montgomery's men took him." Olivia's expression darkened. Apparently, Edward Montgomery was willing to go to any length to prevent his daughter from being with a black man, even if it meant kidnapping, imprisonment, and attempted murder. The depth of Montgomery's prejudice and cruelty was staggering, yet not entirely surprising to Liam. In his years working abuse cases in Chicago, he'd seen how bigotry could twist people into monsters, capable of unimaginable acts, especially when combined with wealth and power that placed them beyond ordinary accountability. "Foster says they're moving on the estate in an hour," Olivia continued. "Sophie gave them detailed information about the layout, security systems, where Rebecca is likely being held." Liam nodded, his mind already shifting to what lay ahead. "We should get ready. Dr. Langley will stay with Hope." "Yes, and 2 agents for protection." Olivia hesitated, then added softly, "Liam, what happens if Rebecca and Daniel are rescued, if they want Hope back?" It was the question that had been haunting him since Sophie's revelations. "Then she goes back to her parents," he said simply, though the words cost him more than he cared to admit. "That's how it should be. Even if it breaks our heart." Olivia's voice was barely audible, but the emotion behind it was palpable. Liam had no answer for that. Instead, he reached down to touch Hope's cheek gently, memorizing the feel of her soft skin, the peaceful expression that showed such complete trust in the adults who cared for her. "We should go," he said finally. "Whatever happens next, Hope deserves the truth about her family. All of it." As they prepared to leave, Sophie appeared in the doorway, her face drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes alert. Despite Dr. Langley's insistence that she rest, she had changed into clothes borrowed from Olivia and appeared determined to join them. "I'm coming with you," she announced before either of them could speak. "I know the estate. I know exactly where Rebecca is being kept, and she trusts me. She'll need a familiar face." Liam and Olivia exchanged glances, both recognizing the logic in Sophie's argument, despite concerns for her well-being. "That's not our decision to make," Liam said gently. "Agent Foster has already approved it," Sophie finished for him, "on the condition that I stay with the secondary team and don't enter until the building is secured. Her determination was impressive, especially given what she'd endured over the past 9 months. Liam recognized in her the same fierce protectiveness toward Rebecca that he felt toward Hope, a bond forged in extraordinary circumstances that transcended ordinary relationships. "Then we all go," Olivia said, taking her sister's hand. "Together." As they joined the FBI teams preparing outside, Liam cast one last glance toward the nursery window. Hope would still be sleeping, unaware that the next few hours would determine the course of her life, and perhaps his as well. The Montgomery estate was a sprawling complex of manicured lawns and imposing stone buildings surrounded by a high wall and sophisticated security systems. From their position in the command vehicle a quarter-mile away, Liam, Olivia, and Sophie could see the main house rising like a fortress and on a gentle hill, its windows reflecting the morning sun. "Primary target is the east wing second floor," Foster was saying, pointing to a detailed floor plan spread across a tactical table. "According to Ms. Bennett, that's where Rebecca Montgomery is most likely being held. Secondary teams will secure the grounds outbuildings and main house simultaneously." Sophie leaned forward, her finger tracing a path on the map. "There's a service entrance here less heavily guarded. In this room at the end of the hall, that's where Rebecca was confined when I was last there." "What about Daniel Williams?" Olivia asked. Sophie shook her head. "I never saw him directly, but guards talked about a guest in the basement level. Here." She indicated a section of the basement on the floor plan. "It's secured separately from the rest of the house." Foster nodded, relaying the information to his tactical teams via radio. "Remember, we have confirmed hostages, so all teams exercise extreme caution. Non-lethal force preferred, but be prepared for armed resistance." Unlike the hunting lodge raid, which had been executed with a small team under cover of darkness, the estate operation involved dozens of agents approaching from multiple directions in broad daylight. The element of surprise had been sacrificed for overwhelming force, necessary given the expanded security they expected to encounter. "When do we move in?" Liam asked, tension building in his chest as the minutes ticked by. "Once the building is secured," Foster replied firmly, "and not a moment before. You're here for a identification and medical assessment only," His stern gaze encompassed Liam, Olivia, and Sophie. They nodded their understanding, though Liam suspected both Bennett's sisters were as likely as he was to bend those rules if the situation demanded it. "Teams in position," Sullivan's voice announced over the radio. "Awaiting your command." Foster took a deep breath, his expression grim but determined. "Execute Operation Sunrise. All teams go." What followed was a coordinated assault unlike anything Liam had ever witnessed. FBI teams converged on the estate from all sides, some breaching the perimeter wall, others entering through gates disabled by technical specialists. Tactical units moved with precision toward their assigned targets, while overhead, a helicopter provided surveillance and additional support. From their vantage point, they could see figures running across the grounds, hear the distant sound of flashbang grenades, and occasionally catch glimpses of agents securing various sections of the property. "East wing breached," a voice reported over the radio. "Encountering resistance. 2 guards neutralized. Proceeding to second floor." Sophie gripped Olivia's hand tightly, her eyes fixed on the east wing of the house where Rebecca was supposedly being held. Liam found himself holding his breath, acutely aware of how quickly such operations could go wrong, how lives could be lost in the blink of an eye. "Basement team in position," another voice announced. "Breaching secure area now." The minutes crawled by, punctuated by terse updates from various teams as they cleared sections of the house. Then finally Foster's radio crackled with the news they had been waiting for. "East wing secure, female hostage located alive. Appears to be Rebecca Montgomery." Sophie let out a small cry of relief, her composure cracking momentarily. Before they could fully process this news, another update followed. "Basement secure, male hostage located alive. Initial identification matches Daniel Williams." The tension in the vehicle shifted to cautious elation. Both Rebecca and Daniel were alive, both rescued. It was the best possible outcome for Hope. Both her parents survived, both could be reunited with her, yet Liam felt a conflicting emotion beneath his relief, a selfish sadness he immediately tried to suppress. Hope would have her biological parents back. She wouldn't need him anymore. Medical teams moving in. Foster informed them, getting to his feet. We're clear to approach. Stay close to me. Follow my instructions exactly. As they drove through the now open gates of the Montgomery estate, the scale of the operation became clear. FBI vehicles filled the circular driveway. Agents moved purposefully across the grounds in handcuffed figures. Montgomery security personnel sat under guard near one of the outbuildings. Where's Montgomery? Liam asked, scanning the faces of the detained men. Not found yet, Foster replied grimly. Nor Vincent Taylor. We're conducting a thorough search of the property, including hidden rooms and escape tunnels, Sophie identified. They parked near the East Wing entrance, where medical personnel were already entering the building. Foster led them through a side door and up a grand staircase, the opulence of the Montgomery home, a stark contrast to the tactical gear and weapons of the FBI agents securing it. At the end of a long hallway on the second floor, a door stood open, agents and medical staff moving in and out. Foster paused before they reached it, turning to address them. Rebecca Montgomery has been through a severe ordeal, he warned. Physical restraint, forced sedation, psychological abuse. She's conscious but disoriented. Dr. Hayes, I'd like you to perform a preliminary medical assessment. Ms. Bennett, Sophie, your familiar face might help calm her. Sophie nodded, her professional demeanor returning despite her obvious anxiety. I'll do whatever she needs. Foster turned to Olivia. Ms. Bennett, Olivia, there's a second team bringing Daniel Williams up from the basement. Given his connection to Hope, your insight might be valuable there. Olivia hesitated, glancing at her sister, but Sophie gave her a reassuring nod. Go, I've got Rebecca. We'll meet you after. With that, they separated, Liam and Sophie continuing toward Rebecca's room, while Olivia followed another agent toward the main staircase to meet Daniel. The room at the end of the hall had been converted into a luxurious prison. Expensive furnishings and silk bedding contrasted with barred windows and a heavy lock on the outside of the door. Sitting on the edge of the bed, attended by a female FBI medic, was a young woman Liam immediately recognized as Rebecca Montgomery. At 19, she retained the ethereal beauty that had graced society pages, but her face was thinner now, her eyes haunted. Her blonde hair, once styled in perfect waves for publicity photos, hung lank around her pale face. She looked up as they entered, her expression wary until she spotted Sophie. Sophie, she whispered, disbelief and hope mingling in her voice. You're alive. They told me you ran away, that you abandoned me. Sophie moved swiftly to Rebecca's side, taking her hands. I never abandoned you. They caught me trying to save your baby and locked me up at the hunting lodge. At the mention of her child, Rebecca's entire demeanor changed. Her back straightened, her eyes widened with desperate hope. Emma? You know about Emma. They told me she died, but I never believed them. I never got to hold her, never even saw her after the birth. Is she... She couldn't finish the question, fear choking her voice. She's alive. Sophie assured her, tears streaming down her face now. I managed to hide her to mark her so she could be identified. She was found 2 days ago. Rebecca's composure shattered entirely. She collapsed against Sophie, sobbing with relief and renewed grief. My baby. My baby's alive. Where is she? Is she safe? Can I see her? Liam stepped forward, then introduced by Foster as a doctor assisting in the case. He knelt before Rebecca, his professional demeanor, masking the emotional turmoil her questions stirred in him. Your daughter is safe, he said gently. She's at a secure location being cared for by medical professionals. She's healthy, recovering well from her ordeal. Rebecca's tear-filled eyes met his, searching for reassurance. You've seen her recently. Yes, Liam confirmed. I was the one who found her. A fresh wave of emotion washed over Rebecca's face. Gratitude, relief, and a mother's desperate longing. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for saving my Emma. Liam felt a lump form in his throat, nearly choking him. This was Hope, Emma, as Rebecca called her. The child he'd pulled from the creek, cared for, come to love. The child who had called him Papa. But she wasn't his. She never had been. She belonged to this young woman whose eyes held the same determination he'd seen in Hope's tiny face. While Sophie provided comfort to Rebecca, Liam performed a basic medical assessment. Rebecca showed signs of malnutrition and the effects of prolonged sedation, but no life-threatening conditions. She would need comprehensive care, physical and psychological, but she would recover. Can I see her? Rebecca asked again, as Liam checked her vital signs. "My daughter, when can I see her?" It was Foster who answered, his tone gentle but firm. "Very soon, Ms. Montgomery. But first we need to complete our operation here, ensure your safety, and prepare proper medical transport." "And Daniel?" Rebecca asked, her voice small but insistent. "His father's been looking for him, is he?" "He's being assessed now," Foster assured her. "Initial reports indicate he's alive and conscious." Relief washed over Rebecca's face, followed by renewed determination. "I need to see them both today, please." The raw emotion in her voice struck Liam deeply. This was not the spoiled daughter of privilege he might have expected, but a young woman who had endured imprisonment and lies, who had never stopped fighting for the truth about her child, who had defied her powerful father to love whom she chose. "I'll make the arrangements," Foster promised. "But first we need to find your father. Do you have any idea where he might have gone? Secret rooms, emergency exits?" Rebecca's expression hardened at the mention of Edward Montgomery. "There's a panic room in his study, behind the bookcase, and a tunnel from there to the garage where he keeps emergency vehicles." Her voice was steady now, anger replacing fear. "He always said no one would take what was his. Not his money, not his power, not his family." Foster relayed this information immediately via radio, sending teams to search the indicated locations. While they waited for updates, Liam completed his examination of Rebecca, confirming she was stable enough for transport to a medical facility. "Dr. Hayes," Foster said quietly, drawing him aside, "once we locate Montgomery, we'll arrange transport for Rebecca, Daniel, and the child to be reunited at the safe house. Given your medical expertise and familiarity with the baby, I'd like you to oversee that reunion." Liam nodded, his expression betraying none of the emotional conflict raging within him. "Of course, whatever's best for the child." Before Foster could respond, his radio crackled urgently. "Sir, we've located a hidden tunnel entrance in Montgomery's study, signs of recent use, and we've got a problem. The panic room shows evidence that weapons were stored there, several missing." Foster's expression darkened. "Montgomery's armed and on the run. Lock down the perimeter, all teams on high alert. No one leaves this property." As agents rushed to comply with these orders, a terrible realization dawned on Liam. If Montgomery had escaped, if he knew his operation was compromised, there was one piece of evidence he might still try to eliminate: the child whose existence threatened to expose everything. "The safe house," he said urgently to Foster. "If Montgomery got away, if he knows we've found hope." Foster was already reaching for his radio. "Team Bravo, immediate security check at Eagle's Nest." The code names did nothing to mask the concern in his voice. Long seconds passed as they waited for a response. When it came, the agent's voice was reassuringly calm. "Eagle's Nest secure, no signs of approach or surveillance. Package remains safe." Liam released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Hope was safe for now. But until Montgomery was captured, the threat remained. "I should get back there," he said to Foster. "If Montgomery is heading for the safe house, Hope needs protection." Foster hesitated, weighing options. "We've got agents there, but your medical expertise might be crucial if he does attempt something." He nodded sharply. "Take Sullivan and head back. I'll continue the operation here and bring Rebecca and Daniel when it's secure." As Liam prepared to leave, Sophie approached from Rebecca's bedside. "She's asking for you," she said quietly. "She wants to know about her daughter. Details only a doctor would notice." Liam returned to Rebecca, who looked up at him with desperate hope in her eyes. "Please," she said, "tell me about her. Is she really okay? Does she smile? Does she cry much? What's her favorite food? Does she sleep through the night?" The simple, profound questions of a mother separated from her child pierced Liam's heart. This was not a woman who would callously abandon her baby, not someone who would harm her child. This was a mother who had been prevented from knowing the most basic details of her daughter's life. "She's strong," Liam said softly, choosing his words with care. "Resilient. She recovered quickly from exposure and a mild case of pneumonia. She smiles often, especially in the morning. She likes mashed bananas, dislikes peas. She babbles constantly, trying to communicate. She's extraordinary." Tears filled Rebecca's eyes again, but she smiled through them. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving her, for telling me these things, for giving me hope when I thought all was lost." Liam nodded, unable to trust his voice. As he turned to leave, Rebecca called after him. Does she have a name? What do you call her? Liam paused in the doorway, the irony not lost on him. Hope, he said simply. We call her Hope. The journey back to the safe house was tense, Sullivan driving with grim focus while Liam stared out the window, his mind racing. They had received no further updates on Montgomery's whereabouts, which could mean anything. That he'd been captured, that he'd escaped completely, or that he was still at large and potentially heading for the one piece of evidence that could destroy him. Hope, Emma, the child who had somehow become the center of Liam's world in just 3 short days. We should be there in 20 minutes, Sullivan said, breaking the silence. The team at the house is on high alert. Nothing's getting past them. Liam nodded, though the reassurance did little to calm his growing unease. He'd seen too many foolproof security measures fail, too many impossible scenarios become reality. Until Montgomery was in custody, Hope remained at risk. They were 10 minutes from the safe house when Sullivan's radio crackled to life. All units be advised. Black SUV spotted heading northeast on County Road 27, matching description of vehicle missing from Montgomery garage. 2 occupants believed to be Edward Montgomery and Vincent Taylor. Vehicle failed to stop at checkpoint, proceeding at high speed. Liam felt his blood run cold. County Road 27 led directly past the turnoff for the safe house. It might be coincidence, Montgomery fleeing toward the state line, or it might be something far worse. ETA to safe house, Sullivan demanded into his radio. 5 minutes from your current position, came the reply. Gents on site advised and in defensive positions. Sullivan pressed harder on the accelerator, the SUV lurching forward as they raced the final distance. They were just turning onto the dirt road leading to the farmhouse when gunfire erupted ahead, sharp cracks that shattered the morning stillness. Shots fired at Eagle's Nest. A voice confirmed over the radio tension, evident even through the static. Black SUV approaching from South Access Road. Agents engaging. Sullivan brought their vehicle to a screeching halt behind a stand of trees, drawing his weapon. Stay here, he ordered Liam. Backup is 3 minutes out. But Liam was already moving, a primal fear driving him forward. He'd lost his family once to violence. He would not lose hope the same way. Hayes, Sullivan shouted after him. But Liam was running now, cutting through the trees to approach the farmhouse from an angle away from the gunfire. The scene that greeted him was chaos. Montgomery's black SUV had crashed through the farm's front gate and now sat bullet-riddled near the porch. 2 FBI agents were down, their conditions unclear from Liam's position. Dr. Langley had barricaded herself and Hope in the house, visible briefly at an upstairs window before ducking back out of sight. Vincent Taylor's body lay sprawled beside the SUV, apparently hit in the initial exchange of fire. But Edward Montgomery himself was nowhere to be seen. Until Liam spotted movement at the side of the house. A figure in an expensive suit moving with purpose toward a rear entrance, a handgun clearly visible in his grip. Montgomery was trying to circle around the agents at the front and enter through the kitchen, directly beneath the nursery where Hope would be. Without conscious thought, Liam changed direction, sprinting toward the back of the house. He had no weapon, no plan beyond a desperate need to place himself between Montgomery and Hope. The cold calculation that had guided his professional life for decades was gone, replaced by the raw protective instinct of a parent defending their child. He reached the back door seconds before Montgomery, positioning himself in the doorway, an immovable obstacle between the mayor and his target. Montgomery pulled up short, surprise flashing across his aristocratic features before hardening into contempt. Move, he commanded, raising his weapon. This doesn't concern you. It does, Liam replied, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. You're not getting to her. Recognition dawned in Montgomery's eyes. You're the ranch hand, the one who found her. His laugh was bitter, tinged with madness. Do you have any idea what you've done, what you've destroyed, everything I built, generations of influence and respect, all threatened by that mistake? She's a child, Liam said, his voice hardening. Your granddaughter, your own blood. Montgomery's face contorted with disgust. No granddaughter of mine would have that man's blood. My daughter was confused, manipulated. That thing upstairs is an abomination that should never have been born. The naked hatred in his voice confirmed everything Liam had suspected about Montgomery's motives. This was not about protecting family reputation or avoiding scandal. This was pure, unadulterated racism, a hatred so deep it had driven him to imprison his daughter, attempt to murder his grandchild, and destroy anyone who got in his way. "You've lost," Liam told him, maintaining eye contact despite the gun pointed at his chest. "Rebecca is free. Daniel is alive. The FBI has your operation, your trafficking network, everything. It's over, It's not over until I say it's over," Montgomery snarled, his composure cracking further. "No one takes what's mine. No one." The gun in his hand steadied his intent clear. Liam tensed, preparing for the impact he knew would come. His only thought a desperate hope that his body would shield those inside long enough for help to arrive. "Put the gun down, Edward." The new voice came from behind Montgomery, Sheriff Thomas Miller, his own weapon trained steadily on the mayor's back. "You're surrounded," Miller continued calmly. "FBI agents on all sides. There's no way out of this except in handcuffs or a body bag. Your choice." For a terrible moment, Liam thought Montgomery would choose death, his own and possibly Liam's, over surrender. The mayor's finger tightened on the trigger, his eyes wild with thwarted rage. Then from inside the house came a sound that cut through the tension like a knife. Hope's cry, high and distressed, calling for comfort from those she trusted. Montgomery flinched at the sound, something indefinable flickering across his face. Not softening, not remorse, but perhaps a moment of clarity in his madness. Slowly, with obvious reluctance, he lowered his weapon. "This isn't over," he said, his voice cold with hatred, as FBI agents swarmed in to secure him. Liam didn't wait to see Montgomery taken into custody. The moment the mayor was disarmed, he turned and ran into the house, taking the stairs two at a time to reach the nursery, where Hope's cries continued. He found Dr. Taunton. Langley barricaded in the corner, holding Hope protectively while using her own body as a shield. The baby was red-faced and frightened, her cries escalating until she caught sight of Liam in the doorway. "Papa!" she called, reaching for him with desperate hands. "Papa!" All the fear, all the tension of the past hours dissolved in that moment. Liam crossed to them in 2 strides, gathering Hope into his arms, holding her close as her small body shuddered with diminishing sobs. "I've got you," he murmured against her soft hair. "You're safe now. I've got you." Dr. Langley sagged with relief, accepting the support of an FBI agent who helped her to a chair. "I heard the gunfire," she explained, her voice shaking. "I grabbed Hope and barricaded us in here. I was prepared to jump from the window if they breached the door." "You did exactly right," Liam assured her, still holding Hope tightly. The baby had calmed considerably in his arms, her tears subsiding as she clung to his shirt with tiny, determined fists. Sullivan appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. "Montgomery's in custody," he reported. "Taylor's dead. 2 of our agents wounded but stable." His eyes softened as he took in the scene. Liam cradling Hope the baby, now peaceful in his arms. "Foster's bringing Rebecca and Daniel here, ETA 30 minutes. The news, while expected, hit Liam with unexpected force. 30 minutes. Half an hour before Hope would be reunited with her biological parents. Before she would begin a new life, one that likely wouldn't include him. "I'll prepare her, Cal," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Make sure she's clean-fed, calm." Sullivan nodded, his expression sympathetic. He knew, as they all did, what this reunion meant. Not just for Hope and her parents, but for the man who had saved her, who had come to love her as his own. Left alone with Hope, Liam moved through the motions of care with meticulous attention, as if each action, changing her diaper, dressing her in a clean outfit, preparing a bottle, could be preserved in memory if performed with sufficient focus. Hope cooperated happily, babbling to him in her private language, occasionally interjecting a clear "papa" that pierced his heart anew each time. "You're going to meet your mother today," he told her as she drank her bottle. Blue Twinkies fixed trustingly on his face. "Your real mother, and your father too. They've been looking for you, fighting for you. They love you very much." Hope seemed unimpressed by this information, more interested in reaching for his face with sticky fingers. Liam caught her small hand, pressing a kiss to her palm with a tenderness that threatened to undo him completely. "They're going to call you Emma," he continued softly. "That's your real name. Emma Montgomery Williams. A beautiful name for a beautiful girl." Hope, Emma, smiled at him around the bottom, a gesture of such pure affection that Liam had to look away for a moment, blinking rapidly against the burn of unshed tears. "I need you to know something. he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. These past 3 days, you saved me, little fighter. I thought that part of me was dead, buried with Michael and Jennifer. But you proved me wrong. You showed me I could still care, still fight for someone, still love. The word caught in his throat, almost choking him. And for that, I will always be grateful. The sound of vehicles approaching broke the moment. Liam rose Hope secure in his arms and moved to the window. 3 black SUVs had pulled into the driveway, and from the second one emerged a young woman supported by Sophie Bennett, Rebecca Montgomery, finally free from her father's control. Behind her came a tall young man with dark skin and a scholar's bearing, despite his evident exhaustion. Daniel Williams Hope's father alive, and finally reunited with the woman he loved. The moment had come. Drawing a deep breath to steady himself, Liam pressed one last kiss to Hope's forehead, then headed downstairs to complete the final act of his role in her life, returning her to the parents who had never stopped fighting for her. Rebecca Montgomery stood in the farmhouse living room, her slender frame nearly vibrating with anticipation. Daniel Williams stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, offering support that she seemed simultaneously to lean into and be too agitated to fully accept. Sophie hovered nearby while Olivia had positioned herself closer to the stairs, her eyes meeting Liam's as he descended with Hope. The moment Rebecca saw her daughter, a sound escaped her, half sob, half cry of joy. "Emma," she whispered, her hands rising instinctively, reaching for her child. Hope, for her part, regarded the room full of strangers with typical baby wariness, her small body tensing slightly in Liam's arms. She had no memory of these people, no recognition of the mother who had held her for only moments after birth before being forcibly separated. Liam crossed to Rebecca, slowly giving Hope time to adjust to the strangers, giving himself time to prepare for the inevitable. "She might be a little shy at first," he said gently. "It's been a traumatic few days." Rebecca nodded, tears streaming unchecked down her face, her eyes never leaving her daughter. "She's so beautiful," she breathed. "So perfect. I dreamed of this moment every day, never knowing if it would come." When Liam reached them, he paused, allowing Hope to look at Rebecca and Daniel before making any move to transfer her. "Hope," he said softly, using the name she knew, "this is your mommy and daddy. They've been looking for you for a very long time." Hope regarded Rebecca with solemn curiosity, then turned to study Daniel with equal interest. After a moment, she looked back at Liam, clearly uncertain about this new development. "It's okay," he assured her, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "They love you very much." With infinite care, he began to transfer Hope to Rebecca's waiting arms. The baby went rigid for a moment, clinging to Liam's shirt, a small sound of protest escaping her. "Papa," she said clearly, her meaning unmistakable. Rebecca's eyes widened, darting to Liam's face, understanding dawning in her expression. "She calls you Papa." Liam nodded, unable to trust his voice. The simple word, so innocent from Hope's lips, so devastating in this context, hung in the air between them. To his surprise, Rebecca's expression held no anger, no jealousy, only a profound compassion. "You've been caring for her," she said softly, "loving her, protecting her." "We both have," Liam managed, glancing at Olivia, who had moved to stand beside him, her presence a silent support. Rebecca looked between them, then back at her daughter, still clinging to Liam. Instead of insisting on taking Hope immediately, she did something unexpected. She reached out to stroke the baby's cheek, allowing her to remain in Liam's arms. "Hello, Emma," she said gently. "I'm your mommy. I've missed you so much, dreamed of you every night. I know you don't remember me, but we have all the time in the world to get to know each other again." Hope regarded her solemnly, then to everyone's surprise reached out one small hand to touch Rebecca's face, a gesture of exploration and tentative connection. "That's right," Rebecca encouraged, her voice thick with emotion. "That's your mommy." Daniel stepped closer, his eyes filled with wonder as he beheld his daughter for the first time. "And I'm your daddy," he said, his deep voice gentle. "I've been waiting so long to meet you." Hope turned to study him, her expression serious, before breaking into an unexpected smile that illuminated her entire face. Daniel's answering smile was radiant, a father beholding his child for the first time, finding himself reflected in her features. "Would you like to hold her?" Liam asked, the offer costing him more than anyone could know. Rebecca hesitated, looking from Hope to Liam and back again. "I want to," she admitted, "more than anything, but I don't want to frighten her." She trusts you. She'll learn to trust you too, Liam assured her. It just takes time. With exquisite gentleness, he transferred Hope into Rebecca's waiting arms. The baby fussed briefly, reaching back toward Liam, but Rebecca spoke to her softly, instinctively swaying in the age-old rhythm that soothes infants. Hope settled gradually, her eyes wide as she studied her mother's face. "Hello, my beautiful girl," Rebecca whispered, tears flowing freely now. "I've waited so long for this moment." Daniel moved closer, encompassing both Rebecca and Hope in a protective embrace. The three of them stood together, a family reunited against impossible odds, a tableau of love that had survived separation, imprisonment, and attempted murder. Liam stepped back, feeling Olivia's hand slip into his, a silent acknowledgement of what they were both feeling: joy for this family, sorrow for their own loss, and the bittersweet satisfaction of knowing they had helped make this reunion possible. "Dr. Hayes," Foster said quietly, having entered without Liam noticing. "Miss Bennett, if we could speak privately." They followed him to the kitchen, where he closed the door to give them privacy from the emotional scene in the living room. "First, I want to thank you both," Foster began. "Without your courage and compassion, this case might have ended very differently. You saved that child's life, helped us rescue 5 women, and brought down a trafficking operation that has eluded us for years." "What happens now?" Olivia asked, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "With Rebecca and Daniel, with Hope, Emma." "Rebecca and Daniel will need time to recover both physically and psychologically," Foster explained. "They'll be placed in protective custody until Montgomery's trial, given new identities if necessary. As for the baby," he hesitated, glancing toward the living room, "that's partly why I wanted to speak with you." Liam tensed, unsure what was coming. Would they be asked to testify, to help with the transition, or simply to walk away now that their role was complete? "Rebecca asked to speak with you both before any decisions are made about Emma's future," Foster continued. "She was quite insistent, said she wouldn't discuss arrangements with anyone else until she had that conversation." Surprise and confusion mingled in Liam's mind. What could Rebecca possibly want to discuss? The details of Hope's care during their brief time together? Medical records? Or was it something else entirely? When Olivia asked, her hand finding Liam's again, holding tight. "Now, if you're willing," Foster replied. "She asked for a few minutes alone with the baby first, but she's ready whenever you are." Liam nodded, drawing a deep breath to steady himself. Whatever Rebecca wanted to discuss, he owed her the courtesy of listening, of answering any questions she might have about the child he'd briefly cared for. When they returned to the living room, they found Rebecca seated on the couch, Hope on her lap with Daniel beside them. The baby was exploring Rebecca's face with curious fingers, seemingly content in her mother's arms now. The sight was both beautiful and painful, right yet piercing Liam's heart with each passing second. "Dr. Hayes, Ms. Bennett," Rebecca said, looking up as they entered. "Please, will you sit with us? There's something important we need to discuss." They took seats opposite the small family. Liam, forcing himself to maintain a professional demeanor despite the emotional turmoil within. "Agent Foster told me everything you did for Emma," Rebecca began. "How you found her, Dr. Hayes, at great risk to yourself. How you both cared for her, protected her from my father's men, gave her the love and security she needed during a traumatic time." Her voice wavered but remained strong. "I can never thank you enough for that." "Anyone would have done the same," Liam said automatically, though they all knew that wasn't true. Rebecca smiled gently. "No, Dr. Hayes, not anyone would have jumped into a freezing creek to save an abandoned baby. Not anyone would have faced armed men to protect her. Not anyone would have opened their heart to her the way you both clearly have." Hope, Emma, chose that moment to babble happily, reaching toward Liam with recognition. "Papa," she declared again, the simple word landing like a physical blow. Rebecca's eyes filled with fresh tears, but her smile remained. "She loves you," she said simply. "Both of you. That much is obvious, and you love her." Neither Liam nor Olivia could deny it, nor did they try. Their silence was confirmation enough. "Daniel and I have been talking," Rebecca continued, exchanging a glance with the man beside her, "about Emma's future, about what's best for her." Liam braced himself for what would come next. Kind but firm assertions of parental rights, perhaps an offer to send updates or photos, the gentle but inevitable separation that would follow. We're going into witness protection, Rebecca said instead. Testifying against my father means we'll need new identities, a new location, a completely fresh start. It will be challenging to say the least. But necessary, Daniel added his first words since the conversation began. Montgomery's operation has ties to dangerous people. Until they are all brought to justice, we won't be truly safe. Liam nodded, understanding the realities of testifying against powerful criminal enterprises. You'll be well protected, he assured them. The FBI doesn't take these things lightly. Yes, Rebecca agreed, but it's not just about physical safety. It's about recovery healing. Daniel and I have both been through trauma that will take time to process. And Emma, she looked down at her daughter with infinite tenderness. Emma needs stability, security, love. She needs a home where she can thrive while we heal. Understanding began to dawn in Liam's mind, so unexpected he hardly dared acknowledge it. Beside him, Olivia had gone very still, as if afraid to breathe. We've discussed this at length, Rebecca continued, and we believe the best thing for Emma right now would be shared custody. The words hung in the air, impossible and wonderful. Shared custody. Olivia repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca nodded, her expression earnest. Daniel and I will be in protective custody for months, possibly a year or more. During that time, Emma would be with you, both of you if you are willing. You would be her legal guardians, with us having regular supervised visits as security allows. As we recover, Daniel added, as the trial progresses and security concerns diminish, we would gradually transition to a more equal arrangement. Eventually, when it's safe for us to establish a permanent home, we would work out a long-term plan. But always with you in her life, Rebecca emphasized. You saved her. You loved her when she had no one else. We would never want to sever that bond completely. Liam felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. This was not at all what he had expected. Not the clean break he had been preparing himself for, but something far more complex and ultimately more hopeful. Why did he asked simply. Why would you share your child with strangers? Rebecca's smile was sad but determined. Because I know what it's like to be separated from someone you love against your will. I wouldn't inflict that pain on anyone, not on Emma, and not on the people who saved her life. She paused, emotion making her voice rough. And because the best parents aren't always the ones connected by blood, but the ones who will do anything to protect their child. You've proven that beyond any doubt. Hope, Emma, chose that moment to wiggle free from Rebecca's lap, sliding to the floor where she proceeded to crawl determinedly toward Liam and Olivia. When she reached them, she pulled herself up on Liam's knee, beaming with accomplishment. Papa, she declared again, then turned to Olivia with equal enthusiasm. Mama. It was the first time she had called Olivia by that name, and the effect was electric. Olivia's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks as she met Liam's equally stunned gaze. See, Rebecca said softly, she's already chosen her family. She's just making room for more love in her life. She looked at Daniel, who nodded encouragement. So what do you say? Will you be Emma's guardians while we work through this difficult time? Will you help us give her the stable, loving home she deserves? Liam looked at Olivia, seeing in her eyes the same overwhelming mixture of emotions he felt. Disbelief, hope, gratitude, and above all, love for the child reaching up to them with complete trust. In that moment, they needed no words to communicate their decision. Yes, Liam said, simply speaking for them both. We would be honored. Hope, Emma, squealed with delight, as if understanding the significance of the moment. Rebecca and Daniel's smiles were tinged with sadness, but also profound relief, the expression of parents who had placed their child's needs above their own desires. Then it's settled, Rebecca said. Agent Foster can help us with the legal arrangements. As if on cue, Foster appeared in the doorway, having clearly overheard the conversation. We can make this work, he confirmed. It's unconventional, but so is this entire case. The most important thing is the child's well-being. And so, in a farmhouse that had witnessed danger and reunion trauma, and healing, an unusual family was formed, bound not by blood or conventional ties, but by something far stronger, the love for a child who had survived against impossible odds. A child who had been abandoned to die, but instead had become a catalyst for healing, for connection, for second chances. Hope Emma Montgomery Williams, whose cry from the creek had been heard not just by Liam Hayes, but by the universe itself. A cry that had brought together strangers who would become family, that had exposed evil and affirmed goodness, that had proven love could flourish even in the harshest circumstances. As twilight fell, the unconventional family gathered on the farmhouse porch. Rebecca and Daniel, Liam and Olivia, with little Emma, passed happily between them. Sophie watched from the doorway, her own role in this miracle acknowledged with grateful hearts. Sheriff Miller stood guard nearby, a silent protector of this newfound peace. In the distance, the creek that had nearly claimed Emma's life now reflected the first stars of evening, its waters flowing ever onward, as life itself would flow. Sometimes turbulent, sometimes peaceful, but always moving toward hope. Liam looked at the child who had broken through 10 years of isolation and grief, who had reminded him that love was worth the risk of loss, who had given him a second chance at family in a form he could never have imagined. In her innocent face, he saw not only his future, but his redemption, proof that even the deepest wounds could heal, that the human heart could rebuild itself from ashes. "Papa," Emma said sleepily, nestling against his chest as night fell. "I'm here, little fighter," he whispered, the promise encompassing not just this moment, but all the moments to come, the challenges they would face, the unconventional path they would walk together. "I'm right here." And for the first time in 10 years, Liam Hayes was exactly where he belonged. Part of a family forged not in convention, but in courage, compassion, and the cry of a child who refused to be silenced.